Lin Shi was reborn, returning to 3 months before the extreme cold descended. In his previous life, he had witnessed the outbreak of natural disasters that annihilated human civilization. Electromagnetic pulses paralyzed the globe. Geomagnetic storms triggered a hellish cold of -100°90 of species went extinct, and surviving creatures mutated into bloodthirsty monsters. And he suffered betrayal from his best friend. This time he vowed to rewrite fate. Awakening his ancestral treasure-gathering basin, Lin Shi activated a heaven-defying cheat. Unlimited space expansion, unlimited material duplication. Clang. Clang, clang. On the frozen lake, Lin Shi struck the ice forcefully with an ice pick. About a meter beneath the ice, a frozen crucian carp was faintly visible. Saliva involuntarily secreted in Lin Shi's mouth. He resolved in his heart that this fish would be his and Zhao Xiao's dinner tonight. Zhao Xiao was a companion he had known for 14 years, with whom he had supported each other for 8 years in the apocalypse. He was the person Lin Shi trusted most in life. This time, it was his turn to find food, while Zhao Xiao was responsible for guarding the surroundings. Suddenly, a barely audible sound cut through the howling wind. Uft! Lin Shi's pupils contracted sharply. A suppressed gunshot. A piercing pain tore through his back. Lin Shi fell to the ground, the ice pick slipping from his hand and flying 3 meters away. What was happening? How could someone approach so close without Zhao Xiao warning him? He turned his head with difficulty, only to see Zhao Xiao standing beside his mortal enemy, Shen Jinbin, speaking obsequiously to him. Through the wind, he caught fragments of their conversation. Space. He's not worthy. Shelter. In that instant, Lin Shi's mind raced faster than ever before. Zhao Xiao had betrayed him. Blood drained from Lin Shi's body, and he grew colder and colder. But more than the physical pain and cold, what he found harder to bear and more chilling was the betrayal by the person he trusted most. The two walked toward Lin Shi. Shen Jinbin looked down at him, his contemptuous gaze undisguised. Lin Shi, you're in my hands now. Lin Shi clenched his teeth so hard that blood seeped out. He stared at Zhao Xiao with a death glare. Everything below his waist had lost sensation. All this brought to him by his good brother and partner. Zhao Xiao couldn't quite meet Lin Shi's bloodshot eyes. He averted his gaze and said, Lin Shi, don't blame me. I also contributed to unlocking the space, but you always treated it as your own thing. You refused to let us go to the shelter together. Well, join Master Shen together. From now on, your space will serve Master Shen, and you won't have to risk your life searching for supplies. I'm doing this for your own good. The apocalypse is getting more dangerous. Lin Shi had an heirloom broken bowl, left by his father, which he always carried even after the apocalypse began. Once while searching for supplies with Zhao Xiao, the two accidentally unearthed an ancient coin. Thinking it was useless, they were surprised when Lin Shi picked up the coin and activated the bowl, granting him a portable. Unease arises from inequality, not scarcity. From that day on, Zhao Xiao's attitude underwent a subtle change. Meanwhile, Lin Shi was still absorbed in the difficult struggle to make them both eat more. He hadn't noticed the change in Zhao Xiao at all. 8 years. A full 8 years. Lin Shi suddenly found it ridiculous. You? Haha, you actually betrayed me for this. Haha. Lin Shi's mouth was full of blood as he laughed. Zhao Xiao clearly knew that Shen Jinbin was one of Lin Shi's most hated enemies. They had supported each other for 8 years through thick and thin, yet they drifted apart because of a space that had been awakened for less than half a year. So this is the crime of possessing a coveted treasure. After laughing, Lin Shi closed his eyes heavily, then opened them and said to Shen Jinbin with certainty, I can work for you. But Zhao Xiao is useless now, isn't he? Zhao Xiao's mouth slightly opened, as if realizing something, fear appearing in his eyes. He turned his head to look at Shen Jinbin. Master Shen. You wouldn't. Lin Shi added fuel to the fire. He will tell you, and he will tell others. My space has nothing to do with him. The more people who know, the greater the risk of the secret leaking. At this moment, Lin Shi's eyes were bloodshot, the depths of his gaze terrifyingly dark. Though he should have looked miserable, there was still a smile on his face, sending chills down the spine of anyone who saw it. Zhao Xiao looked at Lin Shi, a flicker of fear and resentment in his eyes. He squeezed out an uglier smile than crying, and said to Shen Jinbin, Master Shen, I was the one who told you about the space. I can keep an eye on Lin Shi to make sure he doesn't harm you. That's right, you have indeed made a contribution. Shen Jinbin nodded in affirmation. Zhao Xiao's smile became genuine. Your contribution I will always remember in my heart. Zhao Xiao's pupils contracted, his body trembling slightly. He wanted to say more, but Shen Jinbin had already pressed the gun against Zhao Xiao's head. He never intended to let Zhao Xiao live. Uft! Red and white splattered from the back of Zhao Xiao's head. Swish! In that split second, as Shen Jinbin turned the gun and shot Zhao Xiao in the head, Lin Shi threw himself forward with all his might, propping up his body with one arm, while grabbing a sharp piece of ice with the other, hurling it fiercely at Shen Jinbin. Perhaps favored by heaven, the ice chunk struck Shen Jinbin's head directly. Shen Jinbin's body fell onto the ice, the gun in his hand slipping out and landing 1 meter in front of Lin Shi. Lin Shi crawled desperately toward the gun. Closer, even closer. The hit just now wasn't fatal. He had to kill Shin Jinbin. Kill him. Lin Shi's eyes blazed with overwhelming hatred. He touched the gun. A flash of joy crossed his eyes. A pain in the back of his head, and his consciousness plunged into darkness. Beep, beep, beep. Lin Shi sat up, abruptly gasping heavily. Hadn't he just died? So there was a fourth person present. Who was that? Only then did Lin Shi realize that his injuries were gone. The warm temperature around him, the soft bed, none of this belonged in the frigid apocalypse. The piercing beeping continued. Lin Shi, still dazed, caught sight of a phone on the bedside table. A phone that had been useless since the start of the apocalypse. It took Lin Shi a long time to calm down, and he confirmed it. He had been reborn. He had returned to before the extreme cold apocalypse. The current time was March 1st, 2024, at 7:30 a.m. At this time, he was only 19, a freshman in a local university. He didn't live in the dorm, but at home. Lin Shi stood on the bedroom balcony, feeling the cool morning breeze. The March morning sun carried warmth. Looking down from the 28th floor balcony, one could see the traffic outside the neighborhood flowing. Soon it would start to congest. But such a peaceful and prosperous scene would soon be replaced by vast white snow, never to be seen again. The reason lay with the sun hanging high in the sky. Lin Shi raised his hand to shield his eyes, looking at the sun that humanity depended on through his peripheral vision. Perhaps humans had never thought what would happen if something went wrong with the sun. But Lin Shi knew. That would be a disaster, humanity's apocalypse. 3 months later, on June 1st, an unprecedented SS-level solar flare erupted in human scientific history. The date scientists had calculated for the apocalypse. Because the solar flare erupted so abruptly, without prior prediction, it wasn't until the coronal particles were about to reach Tianjin star that some scientists detected the anomaly. It was already June 3rd. Only one day was given for humanity to react. At 10 a.m. on June 4th, a violent electromagnetic pulse destroyed every satellite orbiting Tianjin star. None survived. All electronic devices failed. Then a global geomagnetic storm struck. The electrical power that humanity had spent centuries popularizing was wiped out in an instant, plunging the world back into a dark, primitive society. This was not the worst. After the eruption, the sun seemed to enter a period of weakness. The giant fireball that humanity depended on for survival visibly dimmed. Within 3 days, the entire globe plunged into an average temperature of -50 degrees Celsius. Tianjin star was frozen over, entering an era of extreme cold apocalypse. Over 90 of species faced extinction. Animals, plants, food, low-rise buildings. Everything was frozen under blizzards and ice layers. Humanity faced an unprecedented racial catastrophe. From then on, those who wished to survive would struggle every step. Lin Shi returned to his room, thought for a moment, opened the safe, and took out an unremarkable bowl. The bowl's surface was rough and gray with a chip on its edge. He could squat on the roadside and beg with it. Originally, Lin Shi had found it strange that his father specifically made a will for this shabby bowl. But after activating the bowl and obtaining a space within, Lin Shi realized its uniqueness. It was a treasure bowl. It required specific items to activate, or rather to repair. In his past life, he had only repaired the treasure bowl in the 8th year of the ice apocalypse, by sheer chance gaining the space. But by then the resources he found were barely enough to fill his stomach, let alone store. What mattered most after the apocalypse? Supplies. Supplies that could be carried everywhere without fear of being stolen. Now his first task was to activate this treasure bowl. The key to activating the treasure bowl Lin Shi had found at the southern antique market in his past life. Better to act early than late. That item was crucial to his greatest asset after rebirth, so Lin Shi decided to set off immediately. He found a backpack, put the treasure bowl inside, and left with the bag. Going downstairs, he saw a breakfast shop and recalled he hadn't eaten yet. He was used to going hungry in the apocalypse, often unable to find food for 2 or 3 days, and having to eat snow to stave off hunger. Lin Shi entered the breakfast shop and wolfed down a hearty meal. After eating, he drove to the southern antique street market, guided by his past life memory and navigation. Early in the morning, the street was lined with hundreds of stalls, bustling with people. In his past life, Lin Shi had dug up the key item for repairing the treasure bowl here with Xiao Xiao, an ancient coin with a special pattern. In his past life, that ancient coin had been unearthed from under thick snow. Lin Shi could only confirm it was in this antique market, but couldn't pinpoint the exact location, so he had to search stall by stall. The most common items in the antique market were ancient coins. Almost every stall had them in piles of hundreds. After 2 hours of searching, Lin Shi still hadn't found the coin with the special pattern. His expression turned serious. He had just learned that this antique market only gathered on weekend mornings, and the stallholders were never the same each time. This was undoubtedly bad news. If the stallholder who owned that special coin had only been here on the day of the apocalypse, wouldn't he have to wait 3 months to search again? That would greatly diminish the advantage of his rebirth. In another hour or 2, the stalls on this street would close. If he couldn't find it, he would have to come back next weekend to try his luck. Exhaling deeply, Lin Shi calmed himself and continued to the next stall. Lin Shi. A familiar voice came from behind him. Lin Shi raised his eyes, a flicker of killing intent flashing in his clear gaze. This was a voice he would never forget. Zhao Xiao, his classmate and friend from middle school to high school who had shared 8 years of hardship in the apocalypse, but eventually betrayed him. Suppressing the murderous look in his eyes, Lin Shi turned around in surprise. Zhao Xiao, what are you doing here? Zhao Xiao, wearing an urban management uniform, walked up and patted Lin Shi on the shoulder. I was about to ask you that. What our top student is into antiques now. Zhao Xiao said jokingly, his eyes secretly flashing with jealousy as he looked at Lin Shi's handsome face and expensive outfit. Having lived one life longer than Zhao Xiao, Lin Shi caught that flicker of jealousy, and a cold gleam crossed his eyes. So even at this point in his past life, Zhao Xiao already resented him. Zhao Xiao was a temporary worker at the City Management Bureau, so it wasn't strange for him to be here. He casually brushed Zhao Xiao's hand off his shoulder and said nonchalantly, nothing to do on the weekend. I heard there are many antiques here, so I came to have a look. Zhao Xiao sneered inwardly. He had worked nearby for almost a year and knew this street was full of fakes. Many people came hoping to find a bargain, but not one successful bargain turned up in a year. Last time a naive young man was cheated out of over 100,000 and came to make a scene. But Zhao Xiao wouldn't tell Lin Shi that. He actually hoped Lin Shi would be tricked. After all, Lin Shi had plenty of money. He had to maintain the facade, otherwise how could he swindle Lin Shi? Zhao Xiao smiled and said there are plenty of fakes here, but also some genuine pieces. Half a year ago, an old man spent 200 yuan here and picked up a genuine Han Dynasty artifact, which he sold for 500. Any normal 19-year-old would feel excited upon hearing this. Even someone who just came to browse would want to try buying a couple of items. Lin Shi showed no reaction on his face, but sneered inwardly. How had he never noticed how insidious Zhao Xiao was? He nodded at Zhao Xiao and said, then I should take a good look. Just then a commotion broke out nearby. Many people gathered around. Driven by curiosity, Lin Shi also, seeing the crowd, Zhao Xiao shouted, make way. Make way. Urban management on duty. The crowd indeed parted. Lin Shi moved to the front. A young man in his mid-20s, visibly agitated, brandished an ancient coin and said vehemently, old man, I had it appraised yesterday. It's just a modern craft piece. Fake. And you dared to sell it for 100 each. Refund the money. You must refund it today. The stallholder was an old man over 70, dressed in coarse cloth. The wrinkles on his weathered face twisted together as he said, this is truly my family's heirloom. What heirloom? Are you refunding or not? If you don't, I'm calling the police. The onlookers watched as if enjoying. Even Zhao Xiao leaned close to Lin Shi's ear and said, this sort of thing happens here every few months. In the old days, that kid would get beaten up. There was an unspoken rule in the antique world. Once an item was bought, it couldn't be returned even if it was fake. Being duped meant one's ignorance, and the money spent was a lesson. But obviously this young man either truly didn't know or pretended not to, insisting on a refund. When Lin Shi saw the ancient coin in the young man's hand, his pupils sharply contracted. It was the coin that could activate the treasure bowl. The old man, trembling and with a bitter face, said, this is truly my family's heirloom, passed down from my great-great-grandfather. Young man, I did not deceive you. Many in the crowd looked at the young man with disapproval. Didn't he know the rules? At the same time, some thought the old man was putting on a good act. He had gone to get it appraised. Could a genuine piece be appraised as fake? Lin Shi took a deep breath, walked up to the young man, and asked with a hint of curiosity, could I take a look at the ancient coin in your hand? Qin Tai waved his hand impatiently, seeing that the visitor was a student younger than him. Go away. Go play somewhere else. Lin Shi unfazed replied, I enjoy collecting different coins and am interested in the coin you're holding. You can sell it to me. Upon hearing this, whispers arose from the crowd. Is this kid foolish? He wants to collect something that's obvious. Is he really a student? Does he have that much money? Zhao Xiao was also taken aback, unsure why Lin Shi wanted something he knew was fake. He knew Lin Shi was wealthy. 100,000. He would have to work as a city inspector for 3 years without eating or drinking to accumulate that much. Why would he spend it on this worthless coin? A hint of jealousy flashed in Zhao Xiao's eyes as he stood behind Lin Shi. Why was Lin Shi's fate so much better than his own, even though they were the same age? Qin Tai's eyes brightened when he heard Lin Shi was willing to take it. He immediately handed the ancient coin over to Lin Shi. It was a coin that looked like gold, but wasn't, with one side engraved with a gold ingot and the other with strange characters and patterns. Many people gathered to take a look, but quickly shook their heads and stepped back. Most of the crowd consisted of seasoned antique market hunters, and they had an eye for quality. This ancient coin was brand new, and its design did not resemble any known currency from any dynasty. It looked more like a coin one would use to play games at an arcade. The onlookers regarded Lin Shi as a fool with too much money to waste. An elderly man kindly reminded him, young man, be sure to examine your purchases carefully. Lin Shi felt the warmth emanating from the treasure bowl in his backpack, confirming that this was indeed what he was looking for. Regardless of the coin's monetary value, the ability to unlock a storage space made it priceless to him. Lin Shi casually asked, "How much are you willing to let it go for?" Qin Tai's eyes darted as he assessed Lin Shi's clothing and replied, 15,000, and it's yours. Just moments ago, he had been demanding a refund, and now Lin Shi was quoting a price. The crowd immediately shot him disdainful glances. 5,000, Lin Shi said. Qin Tai snatched the ancient coin back, shouting, "I got it for 10,000. What are you thinking?" Lin Shi chuckled and turned to leave. He counted to 3 in his heart, knowing this person would call him back. Sure enough, before he had walked 2 steps, someone stopped him. Not Qin Tai, but an elderly vendor. "Young man, if you want this kind of ancient coin, I have another one here. I can sell it to you for 80,000. Lin Shi turned around suddenly. "You have more?" The old man shakily took out a cloth pouch from his bosom and pulled out another ancient coin, eagerly offering it to Lin Shi. He was truly in need of money. His son was sick with leukemia. Otherwise, he wouldn't be selling this heirloom coin. His ancestors had insisted that the 2 coins must not be lost, but now he had no choice but to sell them to avoid extinction. Selling these 2 ancient coins would cover his son's surgical expenses. Lin Shi took the coin, lowering his gaze to conceal his shock and delight. It was indeed identical. The treasure bowl also responded. To his surprise, there wasn't just one of these ancient coins, but 2. "Old man, how many of these ancient coins do you have?" Lin Shi asked. "Only these 2 passed down through generations. If it weren't for my urgent need for money, I wouldn't sell them," the old man sighed. This answer was expected. Such special ancient coins would not be plentiful. The one he held was likely the one he had found in his past life. The one in Qin Tai's hands was one he had not discovered in his previous life. "All right, I want this one." Lin Shi nodded at the old man and proceeded to transfer the money using his phone. Seeing that Lin Shi had promptly paid, Qin Tai examined the ancient coin in his hand, wondering if it had some hidden secret. The old man, pleased to have sold the coin, began to pack up his stall, preparing to leave. Lin Shi noticed Qin Tai's expression and knew he had grown suspicious. He was determined to acquire the second. However, from their earlier exchange, he had realized that Qin Tai was a greedy person. If he discovered any clues, he would certainly raise the price or refuse to sell altogether. So after transferring the money to the old man, Lin Shi turned to leave, feigning complete disinterest in the ancient coin in Qin Tai's possession. This made Qin Tai, who was waiting for Lin Shi to slip up, feel uneasy. Ultimately, he chose to trust his cousin and hurriedly stopped Lin Shi. "Hey buddy, why don't you take this one off my hands?" Lin Shi replied with displeasure. "I already have one now. Your coin doesn't mean much to me anymore." Qin Tai glanced at the old man, who was about to leave, and refrained from bothering him any further. He certainly knew that the chance of getting a refund was slim, as the antique world had its rules. Initially, he had thought he could take advantage of Lin Shi because of his youth. He quickly added, "I'll sell it to you for 10,000 now. I got it for 10,000, so I want profit off you. Is that good enough?" Lin Shi merely glanced at him and said 5,000. After some haggling, Lin Shi ultimately bought the second ancient coin from Qin Tai for 80,000. Lin Shi looked at the 2 ancient coins in his palm, a faint smile appearing on his lips. If he hadn't come today, he would have missed this ancient coin. He couldn't wait to see what changes the treasure bowl would undergo in this life. After dealing with the sour Zhao Xiao, Lin Shi hurried back home. Zhao Xiao would have to be dealt with eventually, but not now. Upon returning home, Lin Shi locked the door and entered the windowless storage room, closing its door as well. The activation of the treasure bowl made quite a noise but couldn't be discovered. He took out the slightly warm treasure bowl and placed 1 ancient coin inside. The treasure bowl floated up suddenly, emitting dazzling light. The dirt and patina began to peel away, revealing its true form. Then it transformed into a beam of golden light that flew into Lin Shi's third eye. Lin Shi's vision blurred, and a game-like interface appeared before him. Treasure bowl function: storage space, 333 required points for upgrade 1000 space unit, is in meters. The space has appeared. In his previous life, when he activated the treasure bowl, a similar numerical interface had also appeared. At that time, Lin Shi hadn't figured out its significance, and this time, he didn't waste time studying it either. Existence itself has its reasons. Gaining the space, Lin Shi clenched his fist, unable to hide his joy. The space was equivalent to a small room where he could store any non-living item as long as it fit, using only his thoughts. Time stood still within the space, and items placed inside retained their state at the moment they were stored. Most importantly, this space could be upgraded using gold, silver, and jewels. In his previous life, Lin Shi tried upgrading the space with gold and silver. Unfortunately, during the 8th year of the apocalypse, those items were buried under thick snow, and he couldn't even complete a single upgrade. He wondered if having one more ancient coin in this life would bring about any other changes. Lin Shi took the second ancient coin and placed it on his third eye. Immediately, Lin Shi felt a warmth on his forehead, and the ancient coin in his hand vanished. The treasure bowl interface before him flickered like it was corrupted, becoming blurry. After a moment, the clear interface returned, revealing significant changes. Treasure bowl function: storage space, 333 required points for upgrade 1000 function item duplication, 3 required points for upgrade 10,000. An item duplication has occurred. Lin Shu's eyes lit up. Is it the duplication he was thinking of? He immediately took action to conduct an experiment. With only 3 chances to duplicate, he couldn't afford to waste them. Lin Shu pondered for a moment, returned to his bedroom, opened the safe, and took out the most valuable item in his home, a 500G gold bar left by his father. With only 3 chances to duplicate, he couldn't afford to waste them. Lin Shu pondered for a moment, returned to his bedroom, opened the safe, and took out the most valuable item in his home, a 500G gold bar left by his father. Lin Shu immediately crouched down to pick up the gold bars, placing them on the table to compare with the one in his hand. The size and weight of the duplicated gold bars were identical to the one he held. One of the gold bars even had a tiny flaw perfectly replicated. Lin Shu glanced at the interface of the treasure. The item duplication section now displayed item duplication 2. The current international gold price is 430 yuan, and the pawn shop's buyback price is 10 yuan lower than the market price. The gold bars in his hand were all left by his father, and the 5 gold bars could now be sold for 1.05 million. With the item duplication, this treasure basin had instantly increased his assets by 1.05 million. Treasure basin, this is a true treasure basin, Lin Shu murmured. He fixed his gaze on the 10 gold bars in front of him, trying to calm his excited heart. Although he knew that activating duplication again could potentially turn his 10 gold bars into 20. However, the duplication chances on the treasure basin interface were down to 2. He didn't know whether the total number of 3 could only be activated 3 times, or if it could be replenished. If it could only be activated 3 times, he must save the remaining 2 chances for a more critical moment. Moreover, it was rumored that Shun Wansan, due to his immense wealth, had drawn the emperor's suspicion and ultimately perished. A lone man is innocent, but possessing wealth can lead to disaster. If he suddenly acquired such wealth, it was highly likely that authorities would take notice. With this in mind, Lin Shu decided to use the 5 duplicated gold bars to upgrade the treasure basin. He picked up one of them and silently thought, upgrade space. Suddenly, several red characters flashed on the treasure basin interface. Duplicated items cannot be used for upgrades. It couldn't be used for upgrades. Lin Shu carefully inspected the gold bar in his hand, which appeared indistinguishable from an ordinary gold bar. Confirming there were no loopholes, he felt a tinge of disappointment. But this was also within reason. He picked up the gold bar he had originally taken from the safe and silently thought, upgrade space. The numbers on the interface began to fluctuate, changing to treasure basin function storage space, 333 required wealth points for upgrade, 500 function item duplication, 2 required wealth points for upgrade 10,000. A 500G gold bar can be exchanged for 500 wealth points, and 1 gram of gold can be exchanged for 1 wealth point. This was something Lin Shu had known from his past life. If it were silver, 100G could only be exchanged for 1 wealth point. Lin Shu consumed another gold bar, and with a flash on the interface, the space upgraded. Treasure Basin function storage space, 666 required wealth points for upgrade, 2,000 function item duplication, 2 required wealth points for upgrade 10,000. The space had expanded, although the numbers only doubled. The volume was now 8 times larger than before. Moreover, the required wealth points for the upgrade had also doubled. The value of 2 gold bars was 420, which vanished instantaneously. If this were him 3 years ago, he wouldn't even have qualified to upgrade the treasure basin. 3 years ago, Lin Shu's father passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind an inheritance and a hefty death compensation of 10 million. The treasure basin was the item his father had left for him. Currently, aside from the house and these gold bars, he also had 52 million in cash. This amount may be insignificant in the eyes of the wealthy, but to a 19-year-old, it was already a considerable fortune. For Lin Shu, this amount was still far from enough. Upgrading to the next level of space required 4 gold bars, which in cash was 8600, while upgrading item duplication required 24 million. He also needed to stockpile many resources to build a shelter, which would require a lot of money. After pondering for a while, Lin Shu came up with some ideas. He took out his phone, searched for several real estate agent numbers, and called them one by one. First, Lin Shu planned to sell his house near the city center. His past experience told him that in the extreme cold apocalypse, these high-rise buildings were unsuitable for living. Sanyuan City had flat terrain, a thriving economy, and dense skyscrapers. However, this would not save the millions of inhabitants in the city. Most buildings in the south were designed for heat dissipation with poor cold resistance. As a result, when the apocalypse arrived, 8 out of 10 people in southern cities perished from the cold. The extreme cold apocalypse struck in June. The average temperature in Sanyuan City plummeted from 20°C-27°C to between 50°C and 80°C. Those steel and concrete skyscrapers would deform and crack under the extreme freeze, and the beautifully lit glass windows would be shattered by the blizzards. Within just a year or two, most of these skyscrapers would collapse. Some people didn't die from the cold, but perished in the debris of crumbling buildings. In his previous life, Lin Shi's building didn't collapse, but the one next to it did, causing it to fall as well. Fortunately, Lin Shi had discovered it in time and escaped disaster. This time it was impossible for him to stay there. This house is well located close to the city center. For over a decade, house prices in the country have soared, and San Yuan City's prices have remained high. Even Lin Shi's 128 square meter old house had risen to a staggering price of 8.0 per square meter, valuing it at 10 million. Lin Shi had only two requirements for selling the house: a quick sale and full cash payment. These two requirements seemed difficult, but San Yuan City was not lacking in wealthy individuals. Lin Shi's bottom line price was 9 million. He made it clear that he had contacted multiple agents and would not care about the selling price. He only wanted 9 million. Whoever could sell it faster would earn the extra commission. These real estate agents would spare no effort to help Lin Shi sell the house for a high commission. Although time was tight, even if it was sold for 1 million, they could still earn 1,000. The agents who received the house information were already speculating whether Lin Shi was a rich second generation who was wasteful. No matter how cheap the house was, it still required time to sell, so this was the first thing Lin Shi needed to do. The more money he could gather for his next plan, the better. The next step in his plan was to use all his assets to buy gold bars from the bank, then use the duplication skill to double the gold bars and sell the duplicated ones back to the bank to recover his principal. The remaining gold bars could then be used entirely to upgrade the Treasure Basin. After putting his house up for sale, Lin Shi called his counselor to say he had a family emergency and needed to take a leave of absence. The apocalypse was imminent. Continuing to attend school was merely a waste of time. However, if he simply didn't show up, he would be bombarded with phone calls from the counselor. Thus, it was easier to request a leave. After all, being alone meant no one would expose his absence. Lin Shi contemplated whether to notify the authorities about the impending SS-level solar flare 3 months in advance. This way, human casualties and official losses might be minimized. Yet he quickly dismissed this idea, not to mention how a commoner like him could reach the upper echelons of the government. Even if he reported it, the law enforcement officers would hardly believe his words. He had no way to prove the truth of his claims and would merely be seen as a madman by the police. Spreading news of the apocalypse online would also be futile. Over the past few years, the climate on Tianjin Star had deteriorated significantly, leading many to speculate about various apocalyptic scenarios. Even if he spoke convincingly, he would only be regarded as one of the many alarmists. Moreover, it would leave him vulnerable and in danger. After all, he was just a selfish mortal. Lin Shi drove to the gold bars in his family's safe were purchased by his father at a gold store over a decade ago and could only be sold to a gold shop or a pawn shop. Selling 5 replicated gold bars netted him 1.05 million. Having completed these transactions, night fell. After enjoying a grilled fish meal outside, Lin Shi returned home contentedly. That evening, he also created a workout plan for the next 3 months. In the face of the extreme cold apocalypse, the elderly and children would suffer the most casualties, while physically fit young people would have the highest survival rates. A strong physique could withstand the cold, increase survival chances, protect oneself, and deal with the mutations that might arise after the apocalypse. Just as he finished writing the workout plan, a notification ping sounded from his phone. Lin Shi opened it to find a message from his high school classmates' chat group. This was a small group chat with only 6 members, and Lin Shi had pinned this group message, indicating its importance to his past self. The top message was from Zhao Xiao. Zhao Xiao: hey guys, are you free tomorrow evening? Let's get together. Everyone: Huang Miao, I'm free. Where are we going to hang out? Lin Gu will take us flying. Zhao Xiao: let's go to the Huaqiao Club. I've spent my salary from the past few months, but I want to treat you all to a good meal since you are my best brothers. Sun Xiaodong: Zhao Gu, you're so generous, but I won't be in San Yuan City these days. Su Feifei: I'm in. Zhao Xiao: Feifei, this place isn't suitable for girls. Su Qin Sai: I'm at university in another city. Enjoy your meal and drinks. Let's meet up again during summer break. Lin Shi looked at the messages and recalled many details he had overlooked in his past life. In his past life, although Lin Shi and Zhao Xiao were middle school classmates, Zhao Xiao had always had his own little group, and their relationship was merely one of nodding acquaintances. Looking back, the time when Zhao Xiao's attitude changed coincided with the time of Lin Shi's father's death. At that time, the exorbitant compensation for his father's death made headlines in San Yuan City. Afterward, Zhao Xiao and a few of his friends began addressing Lin Shi as a brother. They frequently invited Lin Shi out for food and fun under various pretenses. Considering that everyone was a student and had little money, Lin Shi would always rush to pay the bills. Reflecting on their more than 3 years of interactions, he realized that these few people had never paid even once. Especially Zhao Xiao, who would openly and covertly lament his financial woes, playing the pity card. He instilled the idea that brothers should share both good times and hardships. Though he would claim it was his treat, he would invariably find ways to ensure Lin Shi picked up the tab. The expenses at the Huaqiao Club were beyond what Zhao Zhao's monthly salary of 300 could cover. After his rebirth, Lin Shi was no longer the naive person he had been in his past life, though he understood these matters at a glance. It seemed that today's purchase of ancient coins had provoked Zhao Xiao, making him eager to take advantage of him. Seeing that Lin Shi had not responded to the messages the group began to him, a cold smile crept onto Lin Shi's lips. Since that was the case, he might as well collect some interest first. Lin Shi sure, but I'm only free after 8 p.m. The next day, accustomed to rising early, Lin Shi naturally woke up at 5 a.m. The interface of the treasure basin had not changed, the consumed items had not been restored. Lin Shi remained unfazed. If he could only use it 3 times, then the new abilities brought by this ancient coin were far less practical than those of the space. Moreover, the financial points required for upgrading the item replication ability were 10 times that of the space. This proved that this ability must be more precious and powerful than the space. He did not dwell on it further. When the time came for him to upgrade using gold, everything would become clear. After washing up, Lin Shi went downstairs for a morning run to warm up, then began to methodically train his entire body. He did not engage in continuous intense exercise, but instead practiced in moderation, stretching and working out in intervals. This not only enhanced his muscular strength, but also increased the flexibility of his muscles and joints. In the face of the apocalypse, he had already developed a set of workout methods best suited for himself, and now he only needed to progress gradually. The training intensity on the first day should not be too high. By 8 a.m., Lin Shi returned home. After taking a shower and having breakfast, Lin Shi began to compile a list of supplies. The extreme cold apocalypse required many items, and according to his previous life's experience, he listed everything he would need. In the afternoon, Lin Shi called a broker and rented a 1,000 square meter warehouse for a month, paying a total of 600 as a deposit. After agreeing to sign the contract the next day, Lin Shi hung up the phone. The warehouse was to keep his activities under wraps. The supplies he would purchase later would first be delivered there before being stored in the space. Inside the warehouse, there was a small watchman's compartment. Lin Shi had already decided to stay in the warehouse for a few days until the supplies were ready. Before long, night fell, and Zhao Xiao and the others in the group were already calling for an early departure. Lin Shi was in no hurry. He only changed his clothes and drove to the Huaqiao Club as it approached 8 p.m. When Lin Shi arrived, Zhao Xiao, Huang Miao, and Su Feifei had already consumed a fair amount in the private room. Su Feifei's eyes lit up upon seeing Lin Shi walk in. Blushing, she came up and clung to Lin Shi's arm, playfully complaining, "Lin Shi, why did you come so late? I've missed you so much." Su Feifei was sweet in appearance with fair skin and big sparkling eyes. When she looked at someone, it felt as if her gaze was solely focused on them, giving the illusion that she had a romantic interest. In truth, she treated everyone in the pond this way. In the last life during the apocalypse, Su Feifei had fared much better than him. Lin Shi took the opportunity to wave at others and withdrew his arm. Su Feifei was taken aback. Before she could ponder Lin Shi's unusual demeanor today, Huang Miao called him over. "Lingu, come here quickly. We're going to drink until we drop today." Zhao Xiao's gaze swept over Lin Shi's arm that had been clung to by Su Feifei, and the smile on his face visibly dimmed. "Lin Shi, Huang Miao, I've prepared a great show for you today." Zhao Xiao smiled mysteriously. Huang Miao curiously asked what kind of great show. Before long, 4 stunningly attractive women entered the private room. Lin Shi raised an eyebrow, a glint of mockery in his eyes. They had actually called for companions. While they looked unattractive, they certainly knew how to enjoy themselves. Lin Shi glanced at the alcohol on the table. At least 1,000 to 2,000 would be needed. He was keen to see if Zhao Xiao could come up with that much. Zhao Xiao looked at Lin Shi with a smile, saying, "Lin Shi, this is for you and Huang Miao. Thank you for being my brothers. Cheers to this drink." Lin Shi did not take a cup, but said, "I have a slight cold today, took some antibiotics, can't drink, you all go ahead." The 3 upon hearing this paid it no mind. The 3 continued singing and drinking in the private room. Time swiftly passed to 1 a.m. And the table was filled with empty bottles. Except for Lin Shi, everyone else showed signs of drunkenness. Su Feifei with hazy eyes expressed that she wanted to go home. Zhao Xiao immediately offered to take her home. Huang Miao's eyes flickered and he chimed in, "I'm heading the same way as Zhao Ge, let's all go together." "Then let's settle the bill and leave together," Lin Shi said with a smile. "The waiter want to get the bill." Zhao Xiao walked up to Lin Shi, hooking his shoulder, his gaze blurred yet shrewd. "Lin Shi, come to my house for dinner tomorrow. My parents really miss you. Last time my mom wanted to recognize you as her godson. What have you thought about it?" Zhao Xiao's words took Lin Shi a few seconds to recall. Last month, when he visited Zhao Xiao's home, Zhao Xiao's parents showed strong affection for Lin Shi and expressed a desire to recognize him as their godson, thereby becoming a family with Zhao Xiao. Lin Shi's father had moved from another city to Sanyuan City to settle down, and Lin Shi had never interacted with relatives on his father's side. After his father passed away, his mother remarried, and he had lost contact with relatives on her side as well. The appearance of Zhao Xiao and these others timely filled the void in Lin Shi's heart, which is why he trusted them so much. In his past life, although Lin Shi did not agree to become Zhao's godson, he had grown closer to Zhao Xiao. Zhao Xiao's family bought a new house, and even lent them $1 million. Later, when the apocalypse struck, Zhao Xiao's parents died in the early days, and that money was never returned. Calculating the time, it was almost time for Zhao Xiao to borrow money from him. No, I'm not used to being someone's son, Lin Shi smiled, though his smile did not reach his eyes. Zhao Xiao had always approached him with ulterior motives. In his past life, Lin Shi regarded Zhao Xiao as his best friend, overlooking many things. Now, removing the filter of good friends, Lin Shi realized that Zhao Xiao's tricks were not very clever, and he could see through them easily now. This was also related to Lin Shi having seen too many treacherous hearts during the apocalypse. Zhao Xiao, rejected by Lin Shi, was slightly taken aback as the waiter entered with the bill. The total consumption was over 38,000, rounded off to 38,000. The waiter presented the bill to everyone. Zhao Xiao, Huang Miao, and Su Feifei looked towards Lin Shi. Lin Shi raised an eyebrow. What are you looking at me for? Zhao Xiao said he was treating. Zhao Xiao seemed to just realize this, touched his pocket in confusion, and awkwardly said, "Oh no, my phone is dead." Zhao Xiao looked at Lin Shi with a pleading gaze. If it were the Lin Shi of his past life, he would have gotten up to pay without a second thought. But at this moment, Lin Shi wore a smile that was not quite a smile, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes as he said to the waiter, "Get him a charger." The waiter's face fell, casting a disdainful glance at Zhao Xiao, and left the room to fetch the charger. Stepping out of the room, he instructed the people outside, "Keep an eye on things." The people outside immediately understood. The atmosphere in the private room became somewhat tense. Huang Miao and Su Feifei exchanged glances. They were already accustomed to Lin Shi insisting on paying, and they had never considered this situation. Although Zhao Xiao kept insisting he was treating, they all knew who would ultimately pay. Could it be that Lin Shi and Zhao Xiao had a falling out? Huang Miao gave Zhao Xiao a look. What's going on? Zhao Xiao was equally perplexed, a flash of anger crossing his face. Lin Shi's actions now left him feeling very embarrassed. His phone had battery. He had just turned it off to provide Lin Shi a reasonable excuse to pay. Could it be that Lin Shi wanted him to beg? Zhao Xiao had already begun to resent Lin Shi internally, yet he squeezed out a smile and said, "Lin Shi, you pay for this meal, and I'll treat next time." Lin Shi would naturally not give Zhao Xiao any face, looking puzzled as he said, "Zhao Xiao, didn't you say you were treating and brought everyone out? Don't tell me you came to treat without any money." Zhao Xiao's smile froze on his face. Huang Miao and Su Feifei looked at Lin Shi with incredulous eyes. They had seen how good Lin Shi had been to Zhao Xiao over the past 3 years. When had they ever seen him act like this? At this time, there were still 4 hostesses in the room, and they hadn't even received their tips. Now a scene of skipping out on the bill was unfolding. Zhao Xiao had confidently declared he was treating, and they all heard it. Instantly, various disdainful, contemptuous, and astonished glances were directed at Zhao Xiao. At this moment, the waiter entered with the charger, placing it in front of Zhao Xiao and gesturing for him to use it. Zhao Xiao found himself in a dilemma, staring at the charger. The waiter coldly urged, "Charge it, sir. We're closing in an hour." Zhao Xiao's face turned as if a palette had spilled, shifting from red to white to black. No matter how cunning, he was just a 19-year-old young man newly out in the world, and at this moment, Zhao Xiao could no longer contain his fury. "Enough." Zhao Xiao gritted his teeth, forcing out a few words to Lin Shi. "Lin Shi, I beg you to settle the bill first. Let's talk about everything else later, okay?" He still believed that he had inadvertently upset Lin Shi. As long as he acted as he used to, catering to Lin Shi would still obediently do as he said. However, how could Lin Shi, who experienced Zhao Xiao's betrayal, still be the same naive fool from his past life? Lin Shi's expression also turned cold. "So you really came to treat without money?" Zhao Xiao felt his pride being rubbed in the dirt, his eyes reddening with anger. "Yes." Lin Shi chuckled, his gaze sweeping over the others. "Since that's the case, let's split the bill." "What, eh? Split the bill, eh?" Now Huang Miao and Su Feifei were no longer calm. Su Feifei furrowed her brow and said, "You guys can't expect me as a girl to pay for a night out, right?" Huang Miao's eyes flickered as he awkwardly said, "I didn't know we were splitting the bill today, or I didn't bring money." Huang Miao nudged Zhao Xiao, whose face had turned as dark as a bottomless pot. "Zhao Ge, what did you do to offend Lin Ge?" "Apologize to Lin Ge." Zhao Xiao looked at Lin Shi's seemingly smiling face and wished he could just kill him. He couldn't even remember what had angered Lin Shi. Lin Shi ignored the 3 of them and paid for his own share, 30 yuan for the lemonade. Zhao Xiao exclaimed in disbelief, "Didn't you say we were splitting the bill?" At this moment, his mind was already spinning. Lin Shi smirked. Seeing Zhao Xiao like this brought him genuine delight. "Yes, we are splitting. Everyone pays for their portion. I only had 1 glass of juice tonight. If you don't believe me, you can check the surveillance." As things progressed to this point, the establishment could only check the surveillance, confirming Lin Shi's words were true. After Lin Shi paid 30 yuan, he left as Zhao Xiao and the others glared at him. Only the 3 remained, facing the waiter, who coldly urged, "You still owe 37,970 yuan. Please settle the bill." Did Lin Shizhen really just walk away like that? The three of them couldn't believe that the usually easygoing Lin Shi had turned so cold-blooded. By the time they reacted, Lin Shi was already far away. Lin Shi, wait for me. Su Feifei wanted to catch up with Lin Shi, but was stopped by the waiter. Why are you stopped? That's my boyfriend up ahead. Su Feifei glared at the waiter angrily and said harshly. The waiter smirked. Then you can call your boyfriend and have him pay for your share as well. Su Feifei, furious and heaving, dared not confront this intimidating waiter. She turned to Zhao Xiao and glared at him fiercely. Why are you in a daze? Pay up. I don't have that much money. In front of the girl he liked, Zhao Xiao felt utterly humiliated and hated Lin Shi to the core. Having worked for less than a year, his savings hadn't even broken 4 digits. How could he possibly afford 38? Lin Shi was right. It was because he saw Lin Shi spend over 100,000 in just a few minutes yesterday that Zhao Xiao, envious as a lemon, thought of calling Lin Shi out today to treat him lavishly. Zhao Xiao knew that Lin Shi would definitely pay and that he couldn't do without them, his only good friends. Even if it hurt, he would compromise. It had been like this before. Why had Lin Shi suddenly changed? Zhao Xiao, not believing in bad luck, called Lin. Stepping out of the clubhouse feeling refreshed, Lin Shi hung up on Zhao Xiao's call, blocked all of them, and returned home. Zhao Xiao's call was disconnected, and when he tried again, there was no connection. At this point, he was truly convinced that Lin Shi would no longer care about them. Faced with the watchful waiter and the security guards outside, Zhao Xiao whispered, "Let's split the bill." Su Miao and Su Feifei naturally refused. One had just started working, and the other was still a student. Both of them were broke. It was Zhao Xiao's idea to come to the clubhouse, and it was also Zhao Xiao who said he would treat them. Even the drinks were ordered by Zhao Xiao. After a heated argument, the clubhouse called the police, and only then did the three of them call their families to get money to settle the bill. Zhao Xiao, wanting to scheme against Lin Shi, ended up drinking the most expensive drinks, thus needing to pay 18,000. Su Miao drank quite a bit too, having to contribute 13,000. Su Feifei reluctantly paid 7,000. The three of them left the Huachao club unhappy. Su Miao and Zhao Xiao had a big fight, accusing each other, and nearly severed their friendship. Su Feifei also did not give Zhao Xiao a good face, blocking him on social media as soon as she returned. Just from one gathering, not only had he lost his good brothers, but the girl he loved had also kicked him out of her life. Zhao Xiao harbored intense hatred for Lin Shi. However, upon returning home, he not only received no comfort, but was also scolded by his father and slapped. His father scolded him for being senseless, saying that the family was preparing to borrow money from Lin Shi for buying a house, and ordered him to apologize to Lin Shi immediately. Mr. Zhao believed that Zhao Xiao's intentions to take advantage of Lin Shi were too obvious, which offended Lin Shi and made him angry. Lin Shi knew nothing of this. Even if he did, he wouldn't care. The next day, Lin Shi got up early to exercise. Not long after finishing breakfast, he received a call from a real estate agent. The agent was a young woman named Chen Qingqing. Mr. Lin, I have a client who wants to see a property. When would you be available? So soon. Lin Shi was, I have time right now, just bring the client over. A few minutes later, Lin Shi heard the doorbell ring. When he opened the door, a middle-aged man in a jacket walked in behind the young and beautiful Chen Qingqing. Chen Qingqing began to detail the advantages of this property. Lin Shi stepped aside. The agents were the professionals in selling houses. He only needed to wait. After viewing the property, the middle-aged man cheerfully stated that he could pay in full. The price negotiated by Chen Qingqing was 9.45 million. Lin Shi was somewhat astonished. This was much faster than he had imagined. When the two were leaving, Lin Shi noticed the middle-aged man reaching out for Chen Qingqing inappropriately, and he suddenly understood what was happening. Shortly after they left, Chen Qingqing returned. Mr. Lin, I have negotiated with the client. We will go through the transfer procedures tomorrow, so please prepare your documents in advance. For such a big deal, Chen Qingqing was using all her charm to prevent any complications. All right. Although surprised by the woman's tactics, Lin Shi was quite satisfied with the result. The sooner the house was sold, the sooner he could start the next step. Chen Qingqing then began detailing the documents needed for the transfer. As she spoke, Chen Qingqing gradually leaned in closer. Lin Shi stepped back a few paces, casting a cold glance at Chen Qingqing. She was around 25 or 26 at the prime of her beauty, and her figure was not bad. But he felt no attraction to a woman who resorted to unscrupulous means. Under Lin Shi's cold gaze, Chen Qingqing felt her heart chill. She had never seen such a cold expression in a young boy's eyes. But thinking of the hefty commission, Chen Qingqing still forced herself to show her most beautiful smile. Mr. Lin, you mentioned that any amount exceeding 9 million would be considered commission. I keep my word, the commission will be transferred to you once the deal is completed. I still need to go out, so I won't keep you, Miss Chen. If she could secure a deal worth 45000, that was her skill, and Lin Shi naturally wouldn't backtrack. With this money, he could also start planning his next steps. Hearing this, Chen Qingqing secretly breathed a sigh of relief and took her leave. Lin Shi was also preparing to go out, as he had arranged to sign the warehouse rental contract today. He had inspected the warehouse and was very satisfied, having previously mentioned several requirements. He needed it to be in a secluded area with good confidentiality where the inside was not visible from the outside, etc. This agent was also quite attentive, having found a warehouse that met Lin Sher's requirements and had even come to inspect it in advance. The contract was signed very smoothly. Once his apartment was handed over tomorrow, Lin Sher could move into the warehouse. As he was leaving, Lin Sher stopped the agent. The agent was a man nearing 30 named Liao Peng. Lin Sher found him to be very attentive and steady in his. With less than 3 months left until the apocalypse countdown, he needed to gather a massive amount of supplies and upgrade his treasure trove, which couldn't be completed in just a few days. Building a shelter would be time-consuming and labor-intensive. He needed help. Mr. Liao, would you be interested in working for me? I can offer you an annual salary of 500,000. Lin Sher presented a grand prospect. Liao Peng was taken aback. An annual salary of 500,000. That was 20 to 30,000 more than what he earned at the real estate agency. However, he was filled with doubt, questioning whether Lin Sher was joking. He cautiously asked, "What would you need me to do?" He couldn't engage in any illegal activities. Lin Sher organized his thoughts and said, "It's like this. I am an enthusiast of post-apocalyptic survival, and I want to build an independent safe house in Shashi, but I am currently tied up in Sanyuan City and hope someone can help me." Post-apocalyptic survival enthusiast. Safe house. Even someone as composed as Liao Peng felt a twitch in his expression upon hearing Lin Sher's words. As a real estate agent, he had dealt with all kinds of properties. He naturally knew that some wealthy people had peculiar ideas. Due to rumors online about a potential Third World War and natural disasters, some rich bosses, fearing for their lives, would build extreme environment survival systems in the basements of their villas. But those were all big bosses over 40. This was the first time he encountered a request to help build a safe house for someone so young. If it weren't for the fact that this young man had just closed a deal with him, Liao Peng might have thought he was a con artist. Lin Sher understood that words alone wouldn't suffice, so he signaled Liao Peng to take out his phone for a payment code and transferred him 100,000. This is over 2 months' salary. Now Liao Peng believed Lin Sher's words. Who would joke around with such a large sum of money? However, being cautious, he still requested to sign a contract with Lin Sher. Lin Sher had the same intention. The shelter was closely tied to his future survival, and he couldn't expect Liao Peng to wholeheartedly work for him just because of a few words. After discussing the contract details, the two signed an agreement. The content of the contract was roughly that Lin Sher would employ Liao Peng as his private steward with an annual salary of 500,000. Liao Peng would be responsible for handling the construction of new houses in Shashi, supervising and inspecting, as well as helping Lin Sher with some miscellaneous tasks. Lin Sher would ensure Liao Peng's salary and other entitled rights. With Lin Sher's urgent timeline, Liao Peng readily resigned and took up the position. With this job, he would be able to buy a house in the suburbs of Sanyuan City in just a few years, which was infinitely better than being a real estate agent. He secretly resolved to work hard to prove his abilities to boss Lin. Little did he know this job would only last 3 months. Lin Sher had never intended to employ him for long. Once the shelter was built, Liao Peng's job would be over. Lin Sher directly commanded, "Liao Peng, go to Shashi and find a piece of land that is willing to sell according to my requirements." Lin Sher's requirements were that the land should be elevated flat, free of tall buildings, located in a remote area, and of a large size, ready for immediate construction. This was Liao Peng's area of expertise, so it shouldn't be difficult for him. Understood, boss. Liao Peng quickly got into character and immediately booked the earliest flight. Shashi in South Province is a renowned tourist destination and the closest city to the equator, experiencing no winter throughout the year. After the arrival of the extreme cold apocalypse, humanity's living space drastically shrank. The northern temperatures plummeted, making it uninhabitable. Even though northern buildings were more resistant to cold than those in the south, the natural gas pipelines in the north quickly froze and burst. Without heating, outdoor temperatures reached an average of -70 degrees, severely disrupting food supplies, forcing northern residents to migrate south. And this was merely the situation during summer. Only a few regions with national grain reserves could barely survive and establish survivor shelters. With the ability to carry vast amounts of supplies, safety became Lin Sher's primary concern. The most terrifying aspect of the apocalypse was not the extreme weather, but humanity itself. Furthermore, Shashi is near the sea, and the government occasionally breaks ice to salvage frozen fish, or food is not as scarce as in the north. Lin Sher had made preparations in advance, not out of greed for government supplies. With the ability to carry vast amounts of supplies, safety became Lin Sher's primary concern. The most terrifying aspect of the apocalypse was not the extreme weather, but humanity itself. In the extreme cold, without food, starving people would resort to anything, and incidents of murder for resources were not uncommon. No city had stable order. Shashi houses the largest official shelter in the Qiming Kingdom, where most of the high-ranking officials, scientific researchers, and military personnel congregate. Naturally, the order there is much better than in other places. Moreover, he had heard that Shashi developed food that could be grown in extreme cold. In this life, he wanted to do it right, directly building his shelter in Shushi. After reminding Liao Peng of the relevant precautions for building the shelter, he returned home. The next morning, after completing his daily morning exercises, Lin Shi gathered all the things he could take from his home into his space. He discarded some useless items downstairs. Before leaving, Lin Shi took one last look at the empty house and turned away without any reluctance. It was just a house for him. Home was wherever he was. Lin Shi did not know that shortly after he left home, Zhao Xiao went to his house looking for him. Unable to find Lin Shi, she was scolded mercilessly by Zhao's parents for the next few days. Lin Shi went to handle the property transfer procedures as per the agreed time. Once the money was credited, he transferred 450,000 to Qingqing. Then he headed straight to the bank. The Qiming Kingdom Bank, the largest branch in Sanyuan City, is located in the city center. Because a large amount of gold was needed, fearing that the bank might not have enough at once, Lin Shi had already called the account manager to make an appointment yesterday, after confirming that the property could be transferred today. When he arrived at the bank, it was already afternoon. On the way, he bought a suitcase to store the gold. Currently, Lin Shi's savings had reached 25 million. His original savings plus the sale of 3 gold bars after deducting warehouse rent and expenses for Liao Peng and miscellaneous spending, he still had 15 million left. He sold the house for 9 million. He borrowed 1 million through various online loan apps. If it weren't for the regulation that an individual cannot borrow more than 1 million from different legitimate platforms, Lin Shi would have borrowed more. Now Lin Shi's total funds amounted to 25 million, enough to buy 60 kilograms of gold. According to the rule that wealth doubles with each level increase in the Treasure Basin, 60 kilograms of gold could upgrade the space 4 times and then upgrade the item duplication twice. Simply upgrading the space 5 times or upgrading item duplication 3 times would not be sufficient. Currently, the space's volume is 666,216 cubic meters, which would be nearly sufficient after 4 upgrades. What Lin Shi wanted to know was what changes would occur after upgrading the item duplication ability. There were quite a few people inside the bank, and Lin Shi walking in with a suitcase was quite conspicuous. Immediately, a bank staff member approached to inquire, "May I ask what service you need?" Lin Shi replied, "I am here to purchase gold. I made an appointment yesterday. May I ask which manager you are in contact with?" Last name Chu. Soon Lin Shi was led to the door of an office. Chu Xiaodai was the account manager at the Qiming Kingdom Bank's Sanyuan City branch. Yesterday, a customer with a deposit of 10 million called her and said he wanted to purchase 60 kilograms of gold at the bank. Chu Xiaodai was quite surprised. What does 60 kilograms of gold signify? Although the international gold price has dropped a few bucks in recent days, each gram of gold still costs 413 yuan plus the bank's minimum service fee of 5 yuan, making the total for 60 kilograms of gold 25 million. Generally, wealthy investors purchase gold stocks or gold futures, and very few buy such a large amount of physical gold. Moreover, the situation has been unstable in recent years and gold prices have remained high, making it very easy to incur losses when buying so much physical gold. Chu Xiaodai curiously checked the customer's information. The information showed that this person was named Lin Shi and was only 19 years old. Chu Xiaodai had a rather deep impression of this boy. 3 years ago, at the largest new energy company in Sanyuan City, Tianqi New Energy Co., a young electrical engineer tragically died due to an accident at work. Tianqi New Energy Co. generously compensated 10 million in damages at the time and was widely praised. Not long after, the son of that electrical engineer received the compensation, and it was still Chu Xiaodai who handled the transaction. Chu Xiaodai remembered that the boy was named Lin Shi. She checked the bank's inventory of physical gold and confirmed there was stock available before replying to Lin Shi that he could come in at any time to complete the purchase formalities. She waited all morning, glancing towards the door from time to time. After waiting for a long time with no one arriving, she planned to take a longer break when there was a knock on the door. "Manager, the customer buying gold has arrived." Lin Shi waited in the hall for a while when a graceful woman in uniform walked out. He glanced at her nameplate, "Client Manager Chu Xiaodai." "Are you Mr. Lin?" Chu Xiaodai said politely with a proper smile, "Please follow me." Lin Shi nodded and followed her into the VIP room. Chu Xiaodai first explained the purchasing process for physical gold bars. Buying physical gold means if the price doesn't rise by at least 10 yuan, it's essentially a loss. This is because additional processing and service fees are added during purchase. However, Lin Shi wasn't buying gold for investment. Losing a few dozen yuan was not a big deal for him. "I've already understood. Let's proceed with the paperwork now." Choosing specifications, opening an account, filling out forms. Aside from the gaze of the client manager, making Lin Shi a bit uncomfortable, everything else went smoothly. With his deposit of 25.4 million yuan and today's instantaneous international gold price of 412 yuan per gram, after deducting processing and service fees, he could purchase 60 gold bars of 1,000 grams each. 1,000 grams was Lin Shi's own choice. Since he planned to sell them back anyway, there was no need to choose a specific style. Additionally, upgrading with two 1,000-gram bars was much easier. After purchasing the gold bars, he could choose to keep them in the bank or take them home. Naturally, Lin Shi chose to take them home. Chu Xiaodai counted out 60 gold bars from the safe. One by one, they were placed on the counter. Lin Shi's eyes grew increasingly eager. With such a substantial investment in gold, Lin Shi was undoubtedly a valuable client. Thinking about the commission he would earn from this transaction, equating to 2 months' salary, Chu Xiaodai found herself increasingly fond of this young man. Lin Shi turned his gaze elsewhere. By the time he returned tomorrow with the replicated gold bars, this woman would likely wish to swallow him whole. The VIP room was separated from the hall by a huge frosted glass with some striped gaps, allowing a glimpse of the situation in the hall. Lin Shi boredly scanned the bank hall. Suddenly his gaze froze. He noticed someone in the crowd who seemed out of place. Upon closer inspection, he realized it wasn't just one person, but 4. These 4 individuals dressed normally, seemingly casually, sitting in different spots of the bank waiting in line. Even the bank security guard couldn't detect anything unusual. However, Lin Shi had survived the apocalypse where he had encountered many villains and had no idea how many. He could sense the murderous aura emanating from these 4 individuals. In a time of peace, how could ordinary people possess such a murderous aura? Could it be? He hadn't come here before, yet now he stumbles upon a bank robbery. Lin Shi recalled whether there had been news of bank robberies in Sanyuan City during his past life in the apocalypse, but couldn't come up with anything. Had he caused some butterfly effect since his return? As if sensing Lin Shi's gaze, one of the men turned his head, prompting Lin Shi to hurriedly divert his attention. Sanyuan City was one of the safest cities in Qiming Country, and as the largest bank in Sanyuan City, who would dare to rob it here? Wasn't that courting death? It was well known that bank robbery was absolutely disproportionate in terms of profit and risk. Perhaps he was overthinking. There were obstructions, so others couldn't see what was happening on his side. However, Lin Shi still felt a bit uneasy. Better safe than sorry. This was his entire fortune. If he were robbed, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. He turned and whispered to the still counting Chu Xiaodai, "Wait, I won't buy today." These 4 individuals had entered without him noticing. He had been quite conspicuous carrying a suitcase, and they came to the VIP room. If this group of people had ulterior motives, he might already be targeted. What? Chu Xiaodai thought she had misheard. "I said I won't buy. I'll come back another day." Lin Shi lowered his voice. However, upon hearing Lin Shi say he wouldn't buy, Chu Xiaodai felt that he was playing her for a fool. After all, that the gold bars had already been taken out, and now he says he won't buy. Was her commission gone? Chu Xiaodai became very angry and her voice rose. "Sir, your transaction has already been completed and the transaction amount has been deducted. If you want to refund it." "Refund?" Lin Shi interrupted Chu Xiaodai, wishing for her to quickly put the gold bars away. Chu Xiaodai's face turned pale with anger, but she still forced a smile. Instead of pulling back the gold bars, she wanted to continue reasoning with Lin Shi. "Mr. Lin, these gold bars are already yours. If you want to return them, it means they will go through the repurchase process and you will incur losses from processing and service fees." Lin Shi glanced sideways and saw one of the 4 men approaching the VIP room. The man, about 30 years old, dressed in black casual wear, had a buzz cut and an unremarkable appearance, but a closer look revealed a hidden ferocity in his gaze, one that hinted at having taken lives. Moreover, although he was of Asian descent, Lin Shi felt that his features suggested he wasn't from the country. Seeing this, Lin Shi became even more convinced that his suspicions might be true. Chu Xiaodai continued to drone on, reasoning with Lin Shi. Lin Shi silently cursed this brainless woman. He lowered his voice, saying, "Quickly put the gold bars away. Otherwise you'll bear the consequences if they are robbed." Chu Xiaodai, seeing Lin Shi so obstinate, was furious, her chest heaving. "Mr. Lin, these gold bars are still on my counter. Even if they are robbed, it is my bank's responsibility. Please don't change the subject." Lin Shi shifted his focus. "Are you saying that if they are robbed now, it won't count against me?" At that moment, the security guard also noticed something and walked over. The VIP room usually dealt with large transactions, and seeing someone suddenly approaching, the security guard instinctively became alert. The security guard blocked the man with the buzz cut. "Hello, please queue in the hall for ordinary transactions." "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." The buzz-cut man displayed an apologetic expression, seeming to lean forward to apologize. However, Lin Shi's pupils suddenly contracted. A black handgun swiftly emerged from the buzz-cut man's pocket, pressed against the security guard's abdomen, and with a loud bang, the gun fired. The security guard fell to the ground in disbelief, blood gushing from his abdomen, staining his once clean and tidy uniform. In the next moment, the other 3 criminals also drew their guns, each aimed at the security guard, who had pulled out an electric baton, firing a shot. The sounds of gunfire and screams echoed throughout the hall. Immediately after, a piercing alarm sounded. A bank staff member sitting at the counter hurriedly pressed the alarm button. Meanwhile, the buzz-cut man had already shot his way through the VIP room door. Lin Shi's eyes met the buzz-cut man's. Seeing the greed and murderous intent in his gaze, Lin Shi immediately crouched down. He hugged his head and moved himself into a corner. If asked how one should react when encountering danger, Lin Shi would confidently tell you to fight if you can, run if you can't, and if you can't run, then surrender. They had 4 guns, and he was unarmed. Step forward. Don't joke around, isn't it better to stay alive? Lin Shi quietly crouched in the corner. The others in the hall had already been subdued by the robbers. These 4 robbers were clearly well prepared, each with a defined role. One was responsible for observing the situation outside, another was watching over the hostages. A third was approaching the crew-cut man with a handbag. Chu Xiaodai at the counter was already scared silly. Who would dare to rob a bank at the headquarters? The crew-cut man walked straight to the counter, pointing his gun at Chu Xiaodai behind the bulletproof glass, threatening, "Take out the gold bars." "Hurry." Chu Xiaodai did not comply. Instead, she began to pack up the gold bars to lock them back in the safe. Though frightened, they had received training, and the bank's bulletproof glass would not be pierced by an ordinary handgun. This was the city center, and the bank's alarm was connected to the nearest security office. In just a few minutes, the security personnel would arrive. However, there were other bank employees outside the counter. One robber pressed his gun against an employee's head and brought the person to the VIP room entrance. The employee was terrified. "Get the gold bars out as quickly as possible. If you're late by 10 seconds, it'll kill someone." Chu Xiaodai had no choice but to comply. Lin Shi quietly watched this scene from the corner. He noticed that no robbers were going to other counters to steal cash. These 4 had a clear target, only the gold in the VIP room. After all, no reasonably intelligent robber would go to a bank to rob cash. It's important to know that every paper bill in the bank has its serial number recorded, making it impossible to spend stolen cash. On the other hand, once gold is stolen, it can be melted down and circulated on the market. But there was one point of doubt. The gold inventory at the counter was limited, and the bank's large gold bars were kept in the vault. If they didn't manage to seize a significant amount of gold, the risk and reward of robbing the bank wouldn't be proportional. How did these robbers determine that there would be a large quantity of gold at the bank today? There certainly weren't many people like him who would spend 25 million to purchase physical gold. Lin Shi turned his gaze to Chu Xiaodai, who was trembling and handing over the gold bars to the robbers. Suddenly, a flash of insight struck his mind. Someone might have leaked the information that he would come to the bank to purchase a large quantity of gold today. With this thought, everything became clear. They had been waiting for this batch of gold bars. Lin Shi felt a chill in his heart, while his gaze turned cold and frightening. Fortunately, he hadn't taken the gold bars, and with the security personnel noticing something amiss, he had avoided a disaster. Otherwise, by the time the gold bars were packed into a suitcase, he would certainly find it difficult to leave alive without any defenses. 60 gold bars were quickly handed out of the window by Chu Xiaodai and collected into the robber's handbag. The gold bars appeared small, but their actual weight of 120 pounds was substantial. One robber found it a bit strenuous to carry them. At that moment, the crew-cut man noticed the suitcase by the counter. Lin Shi silently cursed his luck. Sure enough, the crew-cut man had noticed him. The suitcase he bought to carry the gold bars was black, small, and had a combination lock. The crew-cut man growled at Lin Shi, "Come here. Open that suitcase." Lin Shi showed a fearful expression and obediently walked over to open the suitcase. The robber placed the handbag filled with gold bars into the suitcase. Throughout this process, Lin Shi kept his gaze fixed on the robber's movements. 25 million worth of gold was all contained in a small suitcase. If he could use his space ability to transfer the gold bars into his space now. No, he couldn't. Lin Shi immediately rejected his own idea. The bank's surveillance equipment was still functioning normally. If this suitcase suddenly vanished under the eyes of so many people, it would be too conspicuous. If 25 million worth of gold disappeared into thin air, there would definitely be an investigation. If his space ability got exposed, it would be a huge loss. In the distance, the sound of police sirens could already be faintly heard. The robbers were moving quickly, but the security personnel were even faster. Hearing the sirens, the robbers clearly panicked for a moment. They immediately prepared to leave. Before leaving, the crew-cut man shot Lin Shi another glance. Suddenly, he reached out to grab Lin Shi. Instinctively, Lin Shi wanted to dodge and fight back. But suddenly remembering something, Lin Shi forcibly restrained his instinct and stayed still. The crew-cut man grabbed Lin Shi and pressed the gun against his back, hissing, "Move." Lin Shi obediently followed the robber out of the bank. Outside, there was already a getaway vehicle waiting. Lin Shi was shoved into the car. It turned out there were 5 robbers in total. This was an SUV, and the 4 large men in the back seat were very cramped, but not a single robber complained. They all tacitly accepted that the crew-cut man was taking Lin Shi into the car. Just as Lin Shi was being forced into the car, a reporter who had been working nearby rushed over to capture the video of Lin Shi being kidnapped. The Sanyuan City headquarters is robbed by robbers, and a young man is unfortunately taken hostage. Through the short video, this news was quickly pushed to trending. Countless netizens saw the scene of Lin Shi being taken into the car in the short video. "Damn, can you believe I'm seeing a fool rob a bank in my lifetime? Damn, someone actually dared to rob the headquarters. They must have guts. I bet these robbers won't escape for a day. These robbers actually have guns. I bet on it." I trust the strength of our country's security personnel. The guy who's taken hostage is probably in grave danger, right? That person who was taken hostage looks like my high school classmate. Isn't that the Lin Sure from my university? Damn, my high school classmate's name is also Lin Sure. Soon someone discovered that the Lin Sure they knew was the same Lin Sure. Thus another short video was created. 985 top student robbed at the bank, hostage taken, life uncertain. The short video was made and quickly became popular. The video even featured a clear frontal shot of Lin Sure. Looking at the young and slightly boyish face of Lin Sure in the photo, countless aunties and older sisters prayed for him. They the authorities demanding that the hostage be rescued successfully. The Lin Sure's university classmate, who posted this video, rapidly gained followers. Lin Sure was still unaware that he had gone viral. The vehicle had not been moving long when the sound of police sirens grew closer behind them. The 5 people in the car were clearly breathing heavily. One of them babbled on in a panic. Lin Sure then realized that these 5 people might not be from his country. At this moment, the suitcase containing the gold was placed under one of the robbers' feet. Lin Sure could reach it with his foot. As long as his hand could touch the suitcase, he could transfer the contents into his space. That's right, Lin Sure had come specifically for this suitcase of gold. The gold was still in the counter when it was stolen, untouched by his hands. Naturally, the loss would be accounted to the bank. He would still receive 60 kilograms of gold bars as compensation from the bank. If he had managed to store the gold seized by the robbers into his space, regardless of whether the robbers escaped or not, the loss of the gold would still be their responsibility. He would possess 120 kilograms of gold. After replication, it would amount to a total of 240 kilograms. Using 120 kilograms of gold to upgrade the treasure basin would exceed his original plan by double. Fortune favors the bold. He was safe as long as those 5 robbers were safe. At this moment, Lin Sure was seated with the 3 robbers in the back, very close to the suitcase. However, bending down to touch the suitcase would be too conspicuous. He was waiting for an opportunity. The robber driving the SUV had excellent driving skills, weaving through traffic at speeds around 80 miles per hour. They narrowly avoided other vehicles multiple times, leaving the police car far behind. But soon the robbers noticed 2 helicopters following them from above. Lin Sure heard the buzz of a curse from the buzzcut man. Not long after, a roadblock appeared ahead. A row of sharp spikes that even an SUV could not break through. A group of SWAT officers waited behind the roadblock, and the screeching sound of abrupt braking echoed. Oh, everyone in the SUV leaned forward. Lin Sure's eyes flashed. A great opportunity. At that moment, when everyone was destabilized and had their attention focused on the roadblock and the SWAT officers ahead, Lin Sure took the chance to bend down, quickly touch the suitcase, and then straightened up immediately. Not a single robber noticed anything unusual. These robbers were unaware that the gold they had worked so hard to seize had vanished, all collected into Lin Sure's. Next, he needed to find a way to escape. The SUV abruptly reversed, making a U-turn to flee down a narrow road. The helicopters followed closely. On one helicopter, a camera was aimed at the robber's SUV. The SUV seemed to circle around, and after a little over 10 minutes, an overpass appeared ahead. Cars flowed in and out below the overpass, but Lin Sure's body tensed up. A regular black sedan was parked underneath the overpass. But Lin Sure immediately sensed something was off. Generally, people in a hurry would stop on the roadside outside the overpass, not underneath it. And right beneath the overpass was a blind spot monitored by the helicopter. This could very likely be a vehicle prepared by the robbers in advance to evade capture. If this group of robbers got out of the car, they would discover that the gold bars in the suitcase were gone, putting him in a passive position. It turned out Lin Sure's intuition was correct. The SUV entered beneath the overpass and suddenly slammed to a stop. If it weren't for the change of vehicle with no cars ahead, there would have been no need for such sudden braking. Just as the SUV came to a sudden stop, Lin Sure, sitting between 2 robbers, unexpectedly reached out and touched the hands of the robbers holding guns. The 2 robbers were about to react when their hands were suddenly empty and their handguns vanished. They were momentarily stunned. In an instant, a handgun appeared in Lin Sure's hand, and he shot the 3rd armed robber in the back seat right in the head. Next, he fired 2 more shots, taking out the 2 unarmed robbers in the back. At such a close distance, Lin Sure didn't even need to aim. Hearing the gunshots from the back, the buzzcut man instinctively turned his head, his body still leaning forward from inertia, and before he could react, Lin Sure's gun was already aimed at his head. The buzzcut man's pupils dilated in shock. He never expected that the seemingly weak, second-generation rich hostage could snatch the gun from his companion. His skilled movements, the swift and accurate shooting, and the complete indifference that belied his youthful appearance. The buzzcut man opened his mouth as if to say something, but Lin Sure had already pulled the trigger. All of this seemed to take a long time to explain, but in reality it occurred in the blink of an eye. The robber at the wheel kept both hands on the steering wheel. Realizing something was wrong, he reached for the gun at his waist, but before he could disengage the safety, his head exploded. At this point, all 5 robbers had fallen. The SUV had bulletproof glass which provided sound insulation, and since no other vehicles were passing by, it didn't alert anyone. After shooting the robber in the driver's seat, Lin Sher quickly rolled out of the car, avoiding the sight of passing cars, placed his hand on the car body, and stored both the vehicle and the corpse into his space. He then swiftly approached the black sedan, yanked open the door, and sat inside. The car was indeed unlocked, and the keys were still in the ignition. Lin Sher pressed the gas pedal, and the vehicle sped away. After about 10 minutes confirming that no helicopter had locked onto his location, Lin Sher drove the car into a remote mountain forest. Due to the rapid vehicle change, the helicopter didn't react in time to the fact that the thieves would switch cars. Moreover, there were already vehicle tracks under that bridge, allowing Lin Sher to quickly escape from official surveillance. After confirming that the area was clear and devoid of any surveillance, Lin Sher stored the black sedan in his space and took out the SUV. He began to collect the spoils. 5 handguns from the robbers with a total of 10 magazines. Lin Sher picked up one gun and swiftly replaced the empty magazine. In his previous life, he had handled guns, but the gun control in Chiming country was strict, making it very difficult to obtain a handgun. Guns were extremely valuable resources whether before or after the apocalypse. This time he took such a great risk not only for the gold bars, but also for the handguns. With a handgun, his survival ability in the early stages of the apocalypse would undoubtedly increase significantly. Lin Sher searched the vehicle for a while longer, finding a small amount of cash and 2 daggers. He gathered these items along with the gold bars. Although the bank purchase of gold bars had encountered unexpected events, the harvest exceeded his expectations. After confirming nothing was left behind, Lin Sher stored the SUV back into his space. After taking care of everything, Lin Sher walked a distance to catch a taxi to the Public Security Bureau. Meanwhile, the police car arrived at the overpass where they had lost track of the SUV, only to find it completely empty. The robbers and the SUV seemed to have vanished into thin air. The camera under the overpass had long been sabotaged by the robbers who had prepared in advance. All the public security officers returned empty-handed. Half an hour later at the Public Security Bureau in the city center, are you saying that after they drove the car into the mountains they let you go? And then they drove away. Do you remember the license plate number? Did you see which direction they went? The officers bombarded him with questions. The bank was robbed of gold bars worth $25 million and a hostage was taken. This incident had garnered widespread attention in San Juan City and even the entire country. Now that the hostage was safe and sound, the disappearance of the robbers and the gold bars caused great headaches for the leaders at the City Center Public Security Bureau. Lin Sher answered all the questions he could honestly. For the questions he couldn't answer, he innocently claimed ignorance, not knowing and not paying attention. With the robbers and the car having seemingly evaporated, the more lies he told, the more loopholes there would be. Lin Sher just needed to play dumb. Although he had his own suspicions, as long as the officers conducted their investigation, they would find that he had never come into contact with the robbers before today. It's important to know that just a few days ago he was still an earnest university student. There was no need for such a perfect lie. After an official investigation, Lin Sher's suspicions would be cleared. Officer, will I be able to recover the gold bars? If they can't be retrieved, the bank will compensate me, right? After finishing her question, Lin Sher began to worry about her gold bars. Just as the security guard was about to speak, Chu Xiaodai and a well-dressed middle-aged man hurried into the police station. The middle-aged man immediately asked as he entered, have the hostages been found? Where? What about the gold bars? The security guard said to Lin Sher, the bank's personnel have arrived, and the older one is the vice president of the bank. You can communicate with him directly. Soon the vice president of the robbed bank, Li Chongbin, sat down opposite Lin Sher. The security guard had already left, and only Lin Sher, Chu Xiaodia, and Li Chongbin were in the room. Are you the hostage? You're back. The gold bars are missing. Li Chongbin's tone was interrogative, which made Lin Sher feel slightly displeased inside, though she did not show it on her face. You can ask the security guard about these questions. I want to ask when you will return my gold bars. Li Chongbin frowned and glanced at Chu Xiaodai. Chu Xiaodai took out a document and handed it to Lin Sher, saying, Mr. Lin, your gold bars were taken by the robbers. If this gold is not retrieved, our bank is willing to compensate you for 50 of the loss. If there are no problems, just sign this document. Currently, the news about the gold bars being robbed was spreading rapidly online. If they did not want this incident to damage the bank's reputation, it had to be resolved quickly. 50. Lin Sher turned her head and looked at Chu Xiaodai with a half smile. Didn't you say that if it was stolen, it's your bank's responsibility? Chu Xiaodai's gaze shifted, but thinking of the vice president's instructions before coming out, she still maintained a righteous expression and said the loss of the gold bars was caused by a third party. 4 of our bank's security personnel died in this incident, and 2 were seriously injured. We have fulfilled our duty. We also regret that such an incident occurred. If the gold bars can be found, we will definitely return the full amount to you. Lin Sher glanced at the document handed over by Chu Xiaodai. It was filled with a series of professional terms. The gist was that if the gold bars could not be recovered, the bank would compensate Lin Sher for half the value of the gold bars, and Lin Sher could not hold the bank responsible any further. Lin Sher almost laughed. The way they spoke was so self-serving. Did they really think she was a 3-year-old? Lin Shi glanced at the vice president. He wore a look of calm assurance, as if compensating half was already their mercy. I remember that those gold bars were taken by robbers from the counter. You didn't give me the gold bars, so the transaction between the bank and me was not completed. Your bank lost the gold bars, and it has nothing to do with me. Li Chongbin was somewhat surprised that Lin Shi, a 19-year-old young woman, could remain so calm after being taken hostage by criminals. He spoke earnestly. Lin Shi, the loss of the gold bars is not entirely our bank's responsibility. How about this? We will compensate you with 60. Additionally, I have a good relationship with a professor at your university and can help you apply for a research recommendation spot. What do you think? That's not appealing to me. Lin Shi rejected it decisively. Seeing that Lin Shi was unyielding, Li Chongbin's expression turned somewhat unpleasant, and he said in a stern tone, young people shouldn't be too greedy. I heard that there are no adults in your family, just you alone. You're still young and haven't entered society yet. You don't know that today's young people must learn to compromise, otherwise offending the wrong people could greatly affect your future. Are you threatening me? Lin Shi's eyes flashed with cold light. Chu Xiaodai intervened. Mr. Lin, we are here sincerely to discuss compensation with you. However, we would like to know how you knew these people were going to rob the bank. These robbers are ruthless, but spared you. Mr. Lin, do you really not know these robbers? Are you implying that I am in cahoots with the robbers? Lin Shi laughed in anger. The two remained silent, clearly tacitly agreeing to this implication. Since negotiations were not going well, Lin Shi did not want to waste any more time. She stood up and walked straight out. You two can assist the police in finding evidence, I will not accompany you further. From now on, I will retrieve my belongings through legal means. If she were to sue the bank, the chances of winning were quite high. However, it would take a long time. But since she already had the gold bars, she wouldn't lose anything. As for the threat made by the bank's vice president, she chuckled, hoping he would still be able to stand and talk to her 3 months later. A glimmer of murderous intent flashed in Lin Shi's eyes. At that moment, her phone suddenly rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. Thinking it was some kind of advertisement, Lin Shi directly put it on speaker. When the call connected, a female voice came from the phone. Hello, is this Mr. Lin Shi? I am a reporter from XX News in this city, and I would like to conduct a special interview with you. Do you have time? Lin Shi was stunned. To a reporter from the city. Why would a reporter want to interview her? Just as she was about to refuse, another call came in. It was still an unfamiliar number. Sorry, I need to take another call. After saying that, Lin Shi hung up and answered the second call. Hello, Mr. Lin Shi, we are XX New Media, and we would like to. Before the speaker could finish, another phone call came in. Lin Shi, confused, hung up this one and continued to answer the next. Is this Lin Shi, the student? I am a news reporter. News reporters are all calling her. Lin Shi raised an eyebrow and did not hang up. Instead, she started chatting with the CCTV reporter. I am Lin Shi. What do you want? Mr. Lin, do you have time for an interview? Many netizens are eager to know how you escaped from the robbers. Lin Shi hesitated. She didn't want to gain fame. Netizens in the 21st century could be terrifying. If her little actions were exposed, it would be over. Although she had killed the robbers in self-defense, the fact that she had taken the gold bars was undeniable. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed that Chu Xiaodai and the vice president were both staring at her intently. They seemed somewhat anxious. The refusal that had been on the tip of her tongue turned into an agreement. All right. After agreeing on a time and place, Lin Shi hung up and continued to walk out. Li Chongbin's eyes flashed with annoyance. He had wanted to act before the reporter arrived. Who would have thought that Lin Shi would be so unyielding? Wait, let's talk some more. Chu Xiaodai attempted to grab Lin Shi's arm, but was dodged by her. Lin Shi turned to look at Chu Xiaodai, raised an eyebrow as if recalling something, and said, by the way, I provided the police with a clue regarding the robbers' motive for the robbery. What clue? Chu Xiaodai asked. When I was taken hostage, I heard the robbers say that a bank employee leaked my information about purchasing gold, which is why they targeted this batch of gold bars for the bank robbery. This sentence was actually made up by Lin Shi. She couldn't understand the robbers' conversation at all, but she didn't mind trying to deceive this woman a bit. If someone leaked her information, this woman in front of her was the most likely culprit. Chu Xiaodai's heart sank, seemingly realizing something, and a hint of panic flashed across her face. Seeing the increasingly panicked expression on Chu Xiaodai's face, Lin Shi's confidence surged from 50 to 100%. TSK 4 security guards dead, and over 20 million lost by the bank. I wonder how many years the leaker will be sentenced to. Watching Chu Xiaodai's dazed and despondent demeanor, Lin Shi smirked maliciously and turned to leave. No wonder that a bank robbery which had not occurred in his previous life happened in this life. It was indeed due to the butterfly effect caused by his rebirth and the purchase of gold bars. Li Chongbin glared, shouting at Lin Shi's back, "Stop!" Seeing Lin Shi continue to walk away, without pausing, Li Chongbin firmly grasped Chu Xiaodai's arm. What's going on here? In the absence of the bank being fully at fault, he had only come to negotiate with Lin Shi. Never did he expect that even the robbers were lured by someone from within. Then what's there to negotiate? It wasn't me. Chu Xiaodai cried out sharply. Seeing her guilty look, Li Chongbin realized that the leaker Lin Shi referred to was indeed Chu Xiaodai. Lin Shi had already contacted the television station and had to wrap this matter up before it was exposed. Without giving Chu Xiaodai another glance, he left. Chu Xiaodai was left sitting on the ground, mumbling repeatedly, "It wasn't me, it wasn't me." She had been delighted when she received a call from Lin Shi about purchasing 25 million worth of gold the previous day. While dining with her boyfriend at a restaurant that evening, feeling proud, Chu Xiaodai mentioned that a client intended to buy 25 million worth of gold. Previously, when clients made large deposits, she would boast to her boyfriend, but she had never mentioned any client names. This hardly constitutes leaking client information, so how could she have attracted the robber's attention? However, sometimes events unfold with uncanny coincidences. Sitting behind Chu Xiaodai in the restaurant where she dined were two of the robbers. Walking a long enough night road, one is bound to encounter ghosts. By the time Lin Shi left the security bureau, it was already evening. He found his car and drove to the warehouse he rented. Before long, Lin Shi received several phone calls. Surprisingly, they were from advertisers. Opening his phone and glancing through, Lin Shi realized he had become famous. There were numerous messages from college classmates, high school friends, and even elementary school acquaintances that he seldom contacted. Lin Shi cleared all the messages. He had no desire for fame. If he hadn't known that the apocalypse was coming in 3 months, he might have used this wave of popularity to create short videos and earn some money through advertisements. But the apocalypse was approaching quickly, and he did not have the energy to focus on such things. The current internet users were frightening. If any traces were discovered, he would be finished. After casually tidying up the storage unit, he ate some bread he had stored in his space and collapsed into bed. After a day of wits and struggles, he fell asleep as soon as he lay down. Waking up in the morning, Lin Shi felt refreshed. After his morning exercise, he received a call from the bank while he was out for breakfast. "Hello, Mr. Lin, the gold transaction you initiated yesterday at our bank has not yet been completed. When would you be available to come and collect the gold?" Lin Shi raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Originally, he had intended to use the situation with Chu Xiaodai to leverage his newfound online fame and create a wave of public opinion to force the bank to complete the interrupted transaction. He did not expect the bank to react even faster. Lin Shi replied in 30 minutes. After finishing breakfast, Lin Shi headed to the bank. He thought he would need to negotiate with the bank, but everything that followed went extremely smoothly. The bank president personally welcomed him, sincerely apologized, and handed the gold bars directly to him. He was also given several gifts dubbed as compensation for mental distress. Lin Shi reciprocated by agreeing to the president's request for a photo, posing with the gold bars alongside the bank staff. As Lin Shi left, the bank staff and security personnel proactively helped him carry his things and escorted him to his car, smiling and waving until his vehicle disappeared from sight. This scene was naturally captured by reporters who had been closely following the bank's developments. The photos quickly appeared on news websites and netizens praised the bank's service attitude. But all of this was no longer relevant to Lin Shi. He had originally planned to accept an interview to expose the vice president's recordings and the matter with Chu Xiaodai. Now, having achieved his goal in the shortest time possible, there was no need to waste time on trivial matters. Whether he could survive in 3 months was uncertain. Oh, why waste time on those doomed to fail? At this moment, Lin Shi's attention was solely on the gold bars. On the bed in his small storage unit, 2 neat piles of dazzling gold bars were stacked. One pile was from the bank, just retrieved today, while the other was seized from the robbers yesterday. There were also 3 smaller bars that he had left over from before. A total of 50 million in gold. Thinking that these gold bars might double to 100 million, Lin Shi's heart raced. He certainly couldn't carry 120 kilograms of gold as he did the first time. He placed both hands on the gold bars. Item duplication. As the words fell, dazzling golden light illuminated the small storage unit. Gold bars began to appear out of thin air in the void before Lin Shi. The sound of heavy objects dropping onto the bed rang out continuously. The iron-framed bed creaked under the obvious strain. However, Lin Shi didn't care about whether he would end up sleeping on the floor that night. He counted and found that he had duplicated 123 gold bars, 100 of 1000 G, 3 of 500 G, not a single one missing. However, Lin Shi didn't care about whether he would end up sleeping on the floor that night. He counted and found that he had duplicated 123 gold bars, 100 of 1000 G, 3 of 5. At first, he was uncertain if he would succeed. What if the Treasure Basin had a duplication limit? What if it could only duplicate the gold bars he touched, or if there were other limiting factors? His duplication could fail. Fortunately, he had worried unnecessarily. This item duplication was even more powerful than he had imagined. At this moment, the Treasure Basin's interface also changed. Treasure Basin function storage space 666 funds required for upgrade 2000 function item duplication 1 funds required for upgrade 10,000. The item duplication only had 1 opportunity left. He wondered if the number of times would change after upgrading. Lin Shi began to organize the gold bars. Each gold bar from the bank had a serial number. He sorted out the 60 gold bars he had retrieved today and set them aside. These were meant to be sold back to the bank. Then he placed the other 63 duplicates on the other side. These could be melted down and sold through other channels. Lin Sure picked up 2 original 1000 G gold bars and silently chanted in his heart, "Space upgrade." Suppressing his emotions, Lin Sure proceeded to upgrade the space as planned. With an empty palm, the interface of the treasure bowl began to change. In the blink of an eye, the dimensions of the space in his consciousness doubled, and its volume increased 8-fold. Treasure bowl. Function: storage space, 121212. Required wealth points for upgrade, 4,000. Function: item duplication 1. Required wealth points for upgrade, 10,000. The wealth points required for the next level upgrade have doubled. Without stopping, Lin Sure picked up 4 gold bars to continue upgrading the space. Then he took 6. Having used exactly 31,000 G gold bars after 4 consecutive upgrades, the storage space had become treasure bowl. Storage space, 969,696. Required wealth points for upgrade, 32,000. Function: item duplication 1. Required wealth points for upgrade, 10,000. The area of the space had increased to over 9,000 square meters with a volume nearing 900 cubic meters, equivalent to the size of a museum. In terms of ordinary shipping containers, it was comparable to over 2,900 containers stacked together. Such a large space was sufficient for now. Currently, there were still 91 kilogram gold bars and 3 500-gram bars left to upgrade. Lin Sure picked up 10 gold bars, this time his heart filled with anticipation. Upgrade item duplication. As soon as he finished speaking, the gold bars in his hand vanished. The numbers on the interface jumped rapidly until they finally stopped. Treasure bowl. Storage space, 969,696. Required wealth points for upgrade, 32,000. Function: item duplication 4. Required wealth points for upgrade, 20,000. The number of duplications had indeed increased. Moreover, it increased by 3 at once. This indicated that as long as he continued to upgrade, he could gain more duplication chances. Lin Sure's eyes sparkled. If he could repeat this method of buying gold from the bank a few more times, wouldn't he be able to infinitely upgrade the treasure bowl? But soon he calmed down. Buying gold bars from the bank and selling them back could be said to be a mistake of youth, and if it resulted in a loss, then so be it. Doing it again would inevitably raise suspicion. Moreover, the duplicated gold bars could not be used for upgrades, nor were they easy to sell. Now every citizen's account in Xia country was under the scrutiny of the state, and large sums of unexplained funds entering would quickly attract the investigation of relevant authorities. Apart from the initial 25 million, any additional money could not be shown in public, not to mention spending. Upgrading the treasure bowl was to prepare for the impending extreme cold apocalypse. If he wasted precious time and resources on upgrading the treasure bowl, it would completely betray his original intention. Moreover, the best time to collect gold would be after the apocalypse arrives. Within a month of the apocalypse, a large number of plants and animals would perish. Human food would drastically decrease, and at that time a few loaves of bread could be exchanged for a kilogram of gold. No one would care about gold and silver jewelry when they were struggling to survive. Realizing this, Lin Sure immediately placed his hand on all the remaining gold bars and continued to upgrade item duplication. As the gold bars disappeared rapidly beneath his hand, the numbers on the treasure bowl interface kept jumping. Once the gold bars had completely vanished, the treasure bowl interface changed to treasure bowl. Storage space, 969,696. Required wealth points for upgrade, 32,000. Function: item duplication 22. Required wealth points for upgrade, 58500. Lin Sure was overjoyed, a smile appearing on his face. The number of duplications obtained with each upgrade was double that of the previous level plus the remaining one. That equates to 13,612. A total of 22 duplication chances. According to the current pattern of upgrades, he would receive 24 duplication chances in the next item duplication upgrade. However, that was something for after the apocalypse. The most important thing right now was stockpiling resources. At this moment, Lin Sure had 3,200 remaining. He needed to sell the gold bars to recover the funds. Considering that the gold bars had just arrived today, Lin Sure decided to wait 2 days before going to the bank to sell them, which seemed more prudent. In that case, he decided to deal with another batch of illicit gold bars. Lin Sure first looked for someone in Haishur online. Someone who was a slacker spending all day idling around on the internet. He lured him with a reward of 20,000 to go to a manufacturer in the suburbs of Haishur that produced high-frequency heating equipment to buy a small gold melting machine. Then he found another person to buy several crucibles from another factory. He also found a third person to buy the molds. He instructed these 3 individuals to place the items in 3 relatively secluded locations with less monitoring, and only then did he disguise himself and go to retrieve them. He knew that the authorities were likely still monitoring him, but so what? Even if they discovered he had purchased these items, there was no evidence linking him to the robbers. Moreover, the matter concerning Chu Shaodai should have started to ferment. He believed the authorities would be able to trace the robbers' origins and motives through this lead. With Lin Shi being so cautious, it wouldn't be easy for them to trace it back to him. After bringing the items back to the warehouse, Lin Shi began to operate. Melting, pouring, shaping. He toiled until 3 in the morning, finally transforming all 61-kilogram gold bars into a total of 180 gold bars of varying sizes. Lin Shi had already thought about how to handle these gold bars. There was a pawn shop in the eastern suburbs of Haishur. On the surface, it appeared to be a pawn shop, but in reality, it housed a gang that trafficked various contraband. They accepted and sold anything. Lin Shi knew about it because this pawn shop continued to exist after the apocalypse. It was said that someone had once exchanged hundreds of pounds of rice for a 54 pistol. Lin Shi decided to take 5 kilograms of gold bars tomorrow to scout the place. If it turned out to be just rumors, he could still use these gold bars to exchange for cash. After putting all the gold bars and tools into the space, Lin Shi concluded his day's work and fell into a deep sleep. Hoo. With rhythmic breathing, Lin Shi slowly stretched his body, and in the next moment, he suddenly struck out with a palm. Then he gently retracted. At times still as a maiden, at other times swift as a rabbit. His movements flowed like clouds and water, resembling Tai Chi, but with subtle differences. This was an exercise method designed by scientists of Xia country in his past life to help humanity survive better in extreme cold. It required a certain level of physical fitness to begin practicing. After several days of foundational training, Lin Shi felt his Buddhist agility had noticeably improved, as had his strength and endurance. He began to attempt practicing this technique, known as resonance. In his past life, scientists speculated that after the outbreak of geomagnetic storms, a mysterious substance appeared in the air due to changes in the Earth's magnetic field. This substance, when absorbed by living organisms, could significantly improve their physical condition. The evidence was that any plants or animals that survived the first 3 years of the apocalypse began to exhibit mutations. Their blood and flesh contained this mysterious substance. The surviving animals grew increasingly larger, while a few plants managed to grow in the snow at temperatures below -30 degrees. However, the changes this substance brought to humans were minimal. Aside from allowing humans to withstand extreme cold better, there seemed to be no other significant changes. Thus, in the 6th year of the apocalypse, scientists and martial artists jointly developed this set of exercises. It was popularized among survivors in the 7th year of the apocalypse. This set of movements could accelerate the absorption of this substance by humans. In his past life, after practicing for over a year, Lin Shi could withstand the cold outdoors for 2 to 3 hours, even without wearing a down jacket. At that time, it was said that some in the military could even reach the level of unlocking their genetic locks. Whether or not this was true, he didn't know. As he completed a set of movements, Lin Shi felt his body warming up. After taking a shower and enjoying a hearty breakfast, he drove towards the eastern suburbs. Lin Shi drove to the eastern suburbs, searching for over an hour before finally locating the pawn shop beside a cluster of aging apartment buildings. Sincere Pawn Shop. The signboard had noticeably faded. The shop entrance was narrow and dimly lit. After a moment's reflection, Lin Shi retrieved a handgun from his spatial storage, checked its ammunition, and slipped it into the inner lining pocket of his coat before stepping out of the car. Caution never hurt. He slung a backpack preloaded with 5 Gene of gold onto his shoulders and entered the shop. Inside, a large screen bearing the Chinese character Dang, meaning pawn, greeted him immediately. Beyond the screen, a man sat behind the counter, absorbed in tinkering with something. So engrossed he failed to notice Lin Shi's entrance. Knock knock. Lin Shi approached and rapped sharply on the counter. The man looked up, startled to see an unfamiliar face, and instantly tensed with suspicion. Only then did Lin Shi notice the crossbow cradled in the man's hands. Jet black and sleek, its contours radiated taut, lethal elegance. On the countertop lay an unassembled scope and scattered components. Its overall design unmistakably identified it as a foreign-made interceptor crossbow. This was no ordinary crossbow. It was vastly more powerful than a handgun. Rumored to pierce an elephant's skull at 150 meters, it matched a pistol's rate of fire, surpassed it in precision, required minimal training, and could be freely disassembled or reconfigured to suit any need. Its discharge was quieter than a gunshot, and its bolts could even be recovered and reused. Had Lin Shi possessed such a weapon in his past life, he could have traversed the post-apocalyptic wilderness with near impunity. He had indeed come to the right place. Noticing Lin Shi's gaze, Xie Jinxin hastily draped a cloth over the unassembled crossbow. Though he doubted the young man could recognize it, Xie Jinxin offered a casual explanation. My kid enjoys playing with these toys. Young man, what brings you here? Lin Shi made no attempt to challenge the pretense. He unslung his backpack and placed it atop the counter, then unzipped it to reveal the gleaming gold bars within. Xie Jinxin's eyes lit up. He picked up a gold bar and examined it closely. Selling or pawning? Cash or bank transfer? I'd like to exchange it for certain items, Lin Shi replied. At those words, Xie Jinxin dropped his nonchalant air and studied Lin Shi intently. Ordinary people would have no idea such exchanges were possible here. Only trusted acquaintances, or those introduced by them, knew this shop dealt in unconventional trades. With the apocalypse still distant, Xie Jinxin had yet to fully open his doors for business. Who referred you? What do you wish to acquire? Xie Jinxin asked. Lin Shi sidestepped the first question. Can I exchange for that crossbow you were just assembling? Xie Jinxin scanned Lin Shi up and down as if gauging his age. Do you even know what that is, eh? Before Lin Shi could respond, the door behind him creaked open once more. A voice preceded its owner. Old Xie, has my shipment arrived? A tall, powerfully built man strode in, sweeping past the screen. Only then did he register the presence of another person inside, and immediately fixed Lin Shi with a sharp, assessing glare. Xie Jinxin addressed the burly man. Your goods have arrived, but they're not yet assembled. Please wait inside for a moment while I finish this transaction. Only then did the burly man notice the sack of gold resting on the counter, and a flash of raw avarice flickered across his eyes. Once the man disappeared through the small door behind the counter, Xie Jinxin turned back and said, What do you want? Speak quickly. I still have another customer. The interceptor crossbow on your counter, or the elite crossbow, the Phantom, anything will do, as long as it includes matching bolts. Also 54 caliber pistol ammunition, as much as you can spare. Xie Jinxin's pupils contracted sharply. He scrutinized Lin Shi anew, more deeply, more deliberately. In his line of work, discernment was paramount. With only a few glances, Xie Jinxin could usually determine who was fit for trade and who was not. He refused to deal with desperate criminals, lest their chaos stain his own reputation. Nor would he trade with ordinary civilians whose lives held no use for such gear. His clientele consisted solely of seasoned border runners and mercenaries, men who treated life and death as fleeting currency and who, once equipped, expressed only gratitude, not trouble. Yet Lin Shi unsettled him. At first glance, he seemed little more than a student, perhaps here to pawn some, but upon closer inspection, Lin Shi's gaze proved calm, inward-focused, and piercingly sharp. His posture appeared relaxed, yet every limb rested precisely at the threshold of instantaneous action. That level of hypervigilance was one Xie Jinxin had witnessed only in grizzled veterans who danced daily on the edge of oblivion. Yet this youth's skin and hands were too smooth, too pale, unmarked by calluses or the grim aura of a hardened killer. No trace of brutality clung to him, yet he had identified the unassembled crossbow as an interceptor crossbow at a single glance. Xie Jinxin hesitated, then deferred as he always did to instinct. Son, these gold bars alone won't cover what you're asking for. Name your price. I'll provide whatever you require. Xie Jinxin nodded curtly. Follow me. He turned and unlocked the door behind the counter. The burly man hadn't gone far. The door swung open to reveal him standing just beyond the threshold. Old Xie, what's this boy doing back here? Old Jean, your order can wait. Let this young brother choose first. So the man's name was Old Jean. Lin Shi sensed the raw ferocity coiled within him. Old Jean cast Lin Shi a disdainful sidelong glance and sneered. Old Xie, you've sunk so low now that you'll take anyone's business. A boy who hasn't even grown his full beard. Sell him weapons, and you'll wake up tomorrow with your den raided. Xie Jinxin's eyes narrowed slightly, his smile fading. I know exactly what I'm doing. There was no need for you to offer unsolicited commentary. Lin Shi silently supplied the unspoken retort in his mind. I'm only worried our years of careful trade get ruined by this kid. Old Jean snorted in displeasure, his gaze locking onto Lin Shi with a predatory gleam. Lin Shi met it calmly, unblinking, unruffled. When facing a predator, composure, not flight, is the surest shield against becoming prey. Xie Jinxin, clearly done with the exchange, waved dismissively and motioned for Lin Shi to follow. They passed down a pitch-black corridor and stopped before a heavy aluminum alloy door. Xie Jinxin produced a key, unlocked the door, and after 2 seconds of tactile exploration along the interior wall, lights flared to life. Through the widening crack, Lin Shi glimpsed row upon row of wooden shelves. Enter, Xie Jinxin said, stepping across the threshold first. Inside stood towering tiers of shelving, each laden with sealed wooden crates of varying sizes, their contents entirely concealed. Lin Shi followed him to a shelf. Xie Jinxin lifted down a crate and pried off its iron nails with a screw. He opened the lid, removed the top layer of straw, and there it lay, a pristine, unassembled interceptor crossbow. This is the interception crossbow. It's a fixed price of 2,000. Xie Jinxin stared at Lin Shi, not missing any flicker of expression on Lin Shi's face. The price was indeed high, but if this young man didn't know better, he could make a fortune. Lin Shi remained unmoved, his expression displeased as he said, a sniper rifle costs only a few thousand. How dare you charge me 2,000 for a crossbow? I remember that the price of an interceptor in the foreign black market is only around 8,000. Offer a sincere price. I want quite a few things, and I won't let you make less profit. Next, he needed to exchange for many other items and couldn't be treated like a fat sheep to be slaughtered. Old Xie chuckled, showing no hint of embarrassment on his face. Where on earth did you come from, kid? Fine. I'll give you a fair price, 100,000. I had to pull many strings to get this item. It can't be sold at the foreign black market price. Lin Shi gestured a number, 6,000. 9,000. No less than that. 6,500. In the end, Lin Shi settled on 8,000. He requested 50 arrows to go with it. Since arrows could be reused, Xie Jinxin didn't have that many prepared, otherwise Lin Shi would have asked for more. Next were the bullets for the Type 54 pistol. Lin Shi took all of Xie Jinxin's stock, which amounted to 2,000 rounds. The items here were quite comprehensive. Various models of sniper rifles, handguns, and other firearms were dazzling. But aside from the Type 54 pistol, Lin Shi only took 2 AK-47s and their matching ammunition. Initially, Lin Shi also wanted a few rifles. However, Xie Jinxin stated that rifles were too difficult to procure and he couldn't get them. Lin Shi didn't take any other firearms. Precision firearms like sniper rifles would turn into a heap of scrap metal in extreme cold. In frigid conditions, due to the principle of thermal expansion and contraction, the resistance of firearm components increases and gun oil becomes viscous, making it easier for more precise firearms to jam. Some would even crack under extreme cold. Sniper rifles, precision rifles, and some high-precision handguns were equally unusable. Conversely, simple and robust handguns like the Type 54 could still function, while the AK-47, which was designed to operate in extreme environments, was even more reliable. However, even those that wouldn't jam had their lifespan greatly reduced. After firing a few shots, they needed to be serviced to continue functioning. Otherwise, the heat generated by the barrel in extreme cold would quickly cause moisture to freeze inside the barrel. In a snowstorm, snowflakes could easily enter the barrel. As a deterrent, these weapons were far more valuable than practical. If it was just for self-defense, a handgun would suffice. After all, Lin Shi had more than one. But if he was going hunting or gathering supplies, cold weapons would be more useful. The post-apocalyptic era was also a time when cold weapons thrived. In the end, Lin Shi chose 3 Nepalese military knives and 3 daggers. When faced with Xie Jinxin's pitch for a tang knife, Lin Shi declined. I thought young people like you preferred this type of knife. Xie Jinxin mumbled a few words. The tang knife had indeed become popular online in recent years. Although very sharp, the tang knife's blade is too straight and long, making it prone to breaking upon impact with hard objects or weapons in extremely low temperatures. Lin Shi smiled without explaining, asking, "Do you take orders here?" Xie Jinxin confidently replied, "Just tell me what you want. As long as it's not something huge, I can get it for you. I want the best military-grade cold weather gear along with matching cold weather boots, combat gloves, and a helmet. It needs to be top-tier, the most cold-resistant type. Can you manage that?" Xie Jinxin's eyes widened. Top-tier military cold weather combat gear consists of over a dozen pieces inside and out, capable of functioning in temperatures below -30 degrees. The price is certainly not low. Each set costs at least over 100,000. Lin Shi added a number at the end. I want 50 sets, all tailored to my size. 50 sets. Xie Jinxin's eyes bulged in shock as he exclaimed, "Are you going to war? This kid has so much money." Lin Shi spoke seriously and nonsensically. I plan to stay in Antarctica for a few years. Naturally, Xie Jinxin didn't believe such an absurd remark. However, after hearing what Lin Shi wanted, he began to think that Lin Shi might actually be serious. 5 night vision, 20 military walkie-talkies, 20 individual integrated tents resistant to low temperatures, and 50 military-grade sleeping bags. Also get me a few military crossbows like the interception crossbow and more arrows. As for bullets, give me as many. Xie Jinxin roughly calculated that these items were worth over 10 million. If you want to order so many items, you'll need to give me at least 1 million as a deposit. I only want cash or gold. Xie Jinxin's request was reasonable. Lin Shi nodded. I'll come back tonight. There are still many gold bars in my space, but I can't take them out directly. After agreeing on a time, Lin Shi left the pawn shop with a climbing bag that Xie Jinxin provided. After Lin Shi left, Xie Jinxin continued assembling the crossbow for Old Jean. Old Jean asked with a knowing smile, "Old Xie, is this sheep fat?" Old Jean don't get any ideas about him. Xie Jinxin surprisingly defended Lin Shi. He couldn't see through this young man and didn't want to attract trouble. Just when he asked for a deposit, that young man showed no hesitation. Anyone who could effortlessly take out that much cash or gold and buy so much equipment was definitely not an ordinary person. Most importantly, he had never seen such calmness and composure in a person in their 20s. After hearing Xie Jinxin's words, Old Jean fell silent, his eyes flashing with a dark expression. Upon leaving the pawn shop and returning to his car, noticing no surveillance around Lin, she stored the items in his space. After dinner that night, he took out 5 Jean of gold from his space and went to Xie Jinxin's pawn shop. The night was even quieter in the secluded suburbs. Lin Shi walked straight into the pawn shop, handing over the gold bars for Old Xie to count. Xie Jinxin checked the gold and said, "All right." When the goods arrive, just pay the remaining balance. Then I'll take my leave. Lin Shi wasn't worried about old Jean running away. First, this person was renowned in the apocalypse due to his good reputation. Though he demanded a high price, he provided genuine goods for the money. Secondly, Lin Shi couldn't use the gold himself. If he lost it, it wouldn't be a significant loss. As Lin Shi turned to leave, he was called back by Xie Jinxin. Wait a moment. After hesitating for a moment, Xie Jinxin cautiously said, be careful at night. Lin Shi was slightly taken aback, but quickly reacted saying, thanks. What did he need to be careful about as a grown? Naturally, it was about being cautious of people. Someone had their eyes on him. The car drove along the relatively quiet street. Being cautious, Lin Shi didn't drive fast. Not long after Lin Shi hit the brakes, a row of nails appeared on the road ahead. Lin Shi narrowed his eyes slightly. Shifting into reverse, he pressed the gas and began to back away. He reversed to the intersection he had just passed, quickly shifting gears and adjusting direction to drive down another road. This change took the ambushers completely by surprise. Normal people would either have to repair a tire after it got punctured or get out to check the situation and clear the nails aside. Who would just turn around and run without a word. Not far from where the nails were scattered, a figure in all black, wearing a motorcycle helmet, old Jean, was waiting for the prey to take the bait. Seeing this scene, old Jean cursed and twisted his hand, chasing after the direction Lin Shi had left. Lin Shi drove a few hundred meters when the sound of a motorcycle engine echoed behind him. A glance in the rearview mirror revealed a figure clad in black, wearing a helmet, their face obscured in the dim glow of the streetlights. Lin Shi steered towards a secluded road, the motorcycle closely trailing him. Lao Jin's entire face was exposed except for his eyes, which glinted with malice. He had been toiling outside, risking life and death for several months just to earn a meager living. If he could capture this fat sheep and extort hundreds of thousands, or even millions from him, he could enjoy a carefree life for quite some time. Such rich second-generation heirs were the most fearful of death. With just a little coercion and some unflattering photos, they would comply and spend money to save their lives. This wasn't Lao Jin's first time doing such things. He had previously succeeded several times without fail. Lin Shi's extravagant demeanor and youthful appearance sparked thoughts of opportunity in Lao Jin's mind. After passing through a residential area, Lao Jin twisted the throttle and charged in front of Lin Shi's car, drifting to block his path. Simultaneously, he discreetly gripped the dagger resting on his thigh. As soon as Lin Shi stepped out of the car, he could swiftly subdue the young man. It was only 8 in the evening, still early, and despite being in a remote suburb, there were still sporadic pedestrians in the distance. This time of day often lulled people into a false sense of security, and a normal rich heir would have already cursed and exited the vehicle by now. The surveillance cameras along the road had already been disabled by Lao Jin. If he acted quickly, he could abduct both the person and the car as they exited, making it difficult to trace back to him. Unfortunately, Lin Shi was not an ordinary young man, but a reincarnator who had fought and struggled through the apocalypse, having witnessed the ugliest sides of humanity. A flash of sharpness crossed Lin Shi's eyes as he gripped the steering wheel. He pressed the accelerator and charged forward, his speed soaring from 60 to over 100. At a distance of over 10 meters, how long would it take to cover that at 100? In the next moment, Lao Jin's pupils constricted and he attempted to dodge, but it was too late. With a massive crash, a heavy thud followed. The impact sent Lao Jin and his motorcycle flying several meters. The front of the car was utterly wrecked from the collision, debris from the headlights scattered across the ground, and the bumper was deeply dented. In contrast, Lao Jin's motorcycle was even more severely damaged. Twisted motorcycle parts lay strewn about. What was meant to facilitate a swift escape had become the primary reason for Lao Jin's failure. Had it been a car, Lin Shi would have taken the time to drive to an isolated spot before making his move. But with Lao Jin foolishly blocking his path on a motorcycle, he had no choice but to act swiftly. Upon hearing the loud noise nearby, residents began to search for the source of the disturbance, yet they could see nothing due to the distance. Lin Shi calmly exited the car and approached Lao Jin. The helmeted Lao Jin was still conscious, blood spilling from his mouth, his limbs twisted unnaturally, and his venomous gaze fixed on Lin Shi, yet he could not utter a word. Having spent days hunting, he was unexpectedly pecked in the eye by a sparrow. He never anticipated that a young man who appeared barely 20 could be so ruthless. Without even knowing the reason, he dared to crash into him. Didn't he fear targeting the wrong person? Lin Shi stood a meter away from Lao Jin and whispered, "Isn't it curious why I dared to hit you, Lao Jin?" Lin Shi's calmness and indifference made Lao Jin's pupils contract. He had misjudged. This was no fat sheep before him, but a killer just as ruthless as himself. Mistake. Will? Lao Jin was still struggling in a dying gasp. The earlier collision had completely shattered his left thigh, a rib piercing his internal organs, and his right hand struck hard against the ground, twisted beyond recognition, leaving him unable to move. If he still had the strength to retaliate, he would certainly kill this young man before him. Lao Jin silently vowed that once he recovered from his injuries, he would ensure Lin Shi met a brutal end. However, Lin Shi did not give him that opportunity. He crouched down, picked up a steel pipe that had fallen from the motorcycle, and thrust it into Lao Jin's throat amidst his terrified gaze. Lao Jin's eyes nearly bulged out, his mouth opening and closing as if he could unleash a torrent of malice upon Lin Shi. Even in death, Lao Jin could not comprehend why he who wouldn't dare kill in such a place was so bold. Lin Shi murmured softly as I drove along. Just now I noticed several surveillance cameras along this route were broken. You took care of that, didn't you? Thank you for digging your own grave. Huh. Lao Jin desperately tried to say something. However, the fatal injury caused the light in his eyes to quickly fade. With a thought, Lin Shi stored Lao Jin's corpse and all the scattered debris from the scene along with his own car into his spatial storage. When onlookers arrived after hearing the commotion, all they could see was a pool of glaring blood. A vigilant resident reported to the police, who collected blood samples confirming it was human blood. Yet there was no evidence at the scene to prove a crime had occurred. All the surveillance had been destroyed. There were no victims, no witnesses. This incident couldn't even be filed as a case. It simply ended there. After walking a while, Lin Shi took a taxi home. This was not his first kill, so there was nothing to fear. In the apocalypse, everyone was a hunter, and everyone was. He was no good person. Those who dared to covet him should not blame him for being merciless. Lin Shi returned to the warehouse, took a shower, and fell asleep immediately. The next day, Lin Shi glanced at the time. It was already March 7th, the 7th day since his reincarnation. He checked the gold prices today and found they had risen by $5 over the past 2 days. He decided to sell the gold today to cash out and continue with his next stockpiling plan. After morning exercises and breakfast, Lin Shi took a taxi to the bank. Just 2 days ago, Lin Shi was the talk of the bank. Upon entering with his suitcase, he was immediately recognized. Mr. Lin, what business would you like to conduct? Since Chu Xiaodai leaked client information, although the bank didn't make a fuss for the sake of its reputation, they had secretly dismissed her. Now Lin Shi's customer service manager was another man in his 30s named Feng Jian. This was after Feng Jian learned of Lin Shi's potential and had fought to secure a cigarette from his superior. Feng Jian, who was originally assisting another client in processing a credit card, lit up upon seeing Lin Shi. The sight of Lin Shi's suitcase nearly made his eyes sparkle. This demeanor, this suitcase. Wasn't it just like when Lin Shi angrily purchased gold bars for 25 back then when he heard that a client was purchasing 25 million in gold bars from Chu Xiaodai? He and other customer managers were not shy about expressing their envy and jealousy. Little did he expect that such good fortune would soon come his way. Feng Jian hastily abandoned the user who was supposed to apply for a large credit card, letting another colleague take care of them. Compared to the commission from selling 25 million worth of gold, a credit card small commission was nothing. Feng Jian quickly approached Lin Shi, wearing the most sincere smile on his face. Hello, Mr. Lin, I am your new account manager, Xiao Feng. What business are you here for today? Well, let's talk inside. Sure, this way, please. Feng Jian eagerly welcomed Lin Shi to the VIP lounge, secretly enjoying the envious glances from his colleagues. Lin Shi casually spent 25 million on gold, which surely meant he had even more deposits in other banks. If he could bring those deposits over, his performance would soar. The other bank staff shared the same thoughts. For them, performance equated to salary. A high-quality client was like a benefactor. But Feng Jian acted too quickly. They could only curse him quietly. That little man. Lin Shi approached the VIP window, ready to speak. Feng Jian hurriedly said, Mr. Lin, please take a seat and wait a moment. After speaking, he swiftly left. Lin Shi had no choice but to sit and wait. Soon Feng Jian returned holding a beautifully packaged gift box. The bank prepared gifts for high-quality clients every year with different tiers of gifts based on client levels. This year, the bank prepared 2 bottles of Moutai for the highest-tier clients. Lin Shi was not originally a top-tier client. However, Feng Jian, wanting to retain such a valuable client, personally paid for a portion. As long as Lin Shi returned to the bank for a large investment, not only could he break even, but he could also boost his performance, leading to a rapid salary increase. Originally, he planned to call Lin Shi to deliver it in the next couple of days, but unexpectedly Lin Shi came directly. Mr. Lin, this is your gift for this year along with a personal token of my appreciation. Lin Shi paid no mind and nodded. He directly got to the point, saying, please assist me with the gold bar buyback procedure. With that, he opened his suitcase, revealing a whole box of 60-kilogram gold bars. Feng Jian was stunned. The expression on his face was quite remarkable. He confirmed, you mean you want to buy back these gold bars? Lin Shi nodded. Feng Jian glanced at today's gold price and forced a smile, saying, Mr. Lin, if you sell these gold bars now, you will incur a loss. I know Lin Shi had already prepared a reason for this on the way here. I've understood that it was an impulsive decision to buy so many gold bars. Now that I've thought it through, investing in gold bars isn't worthwhile. I intend to use this money for other investments. Despite a few attempts to persuade him, Lin Shi's mind remained unchanged, which only increased Lin Shi's impatience. Although Feng Jian was reluctant, he had no choice but to begin the gold bar buyback process. The buyback process was much more complicated than the purchasing process. Each gold bar certification code had to be cross-checked with the serial number on the bar confirming that the packaging was intact and the bars were free from scratches among other details. This was not something that could be completed in a short time. Feng Jian called over a counter staff member to help him organize. When the counter staff heard that Lin Shi was selling the gold bars he had just bought, there was a hint of schadenfreude in their eyes. Feng Jian's face darkened further. He wouldn't get a share of the commission for the sale, yet he had to do the work for the buyback. If it weren't for believing Lin Shi was a potential client, Feng Jian would have already shot a few contemptuous looks at him. After spending an entire morning, all the gold bars were finally bought back. Lin Shi's account received 24.78 million, resulting in a loss of over 6,000. With the target achieved, that small amount of money was of no concern to Lin Shi. After declining all of Feng Jian's investment projects, Lin Shi left, while Feng Jian forced a smile, watching him take away the 2 bottles of Mao Dai. Deep down, Feng Jian was filled with regret. He had spent over 1,000 just for this gift. He even spent a pack of cigarettes. What frustrated him even more was that for the time to come he would be secretly ridiculed by his colleagues for being a fool. Naturally, Lin Shi was not concerned about any of this. After leaving the bank, Lin Shi went directly to the grain and oil wholesale market. He ordered 100 tons of rice, 200 bags of 50 kilograms each, 100 bags of flour, 100 boxes of cooking oil, 100 boxes of table salt. Lin Shi stockpiled so much salt because after the seawater froze, extracting salt became 100 times more challenging than it is now. Since salt is currently cheap and doesn't take up much space, Lin Shi decided to stock up a bit more. Then he ordered 100 boxes each of monosodium glutamate, chicken essence, soy sauce, vinegar, and other condiments. Instant noodles, sausages, ham luncheon, meat noodles, and so on. He ordered 100 boxes of each. Lin Shi also ordered 100 boxes of hot pot base and various seasoning packs. Looking ahead to the extreme cold, enjoying hot pot with boiled meat every day would be a true delight. Lin Shi glanced around for any miscellaneous items to buy. The total amount of goods purchased filled 7 container trucks. He spent over $1 million. The grain and oil wholesale market treated Lin Shi like the buyer from a large supermarket, driving the prices down to the lowest, eagerly anticipating Lin Shi's next purchase. Loading all these items in the shortest time required several hours. Lin Shi asked them to send more workers to help with loading and unloading. After paying the deposit and leaving the address, he ran to the neighboring farmer's market. He ordered thousands of pounds of various live fish, requiring them to be gutted and scaled. 1 ton of chickens and ducks, 1 ton of fresh pork, beef, lamb, and 1 to 2 tons of eggs each. By now it was already afternoon, and these could only be delivered the next day. Especially the live fish, because Lin Shi requested them to be killed fresh, which not only added an extra $1 per pound, but would take several days to deliver completely. Next came dried seaweed, various dried seafood, and Lin Shi ordered hundreds of pounds of ginger scallions. The time-stopping property of the space meant that whatever was put inside it would remain the same when taken out. Were it not for the fact that living things couldn't be stored in the space, Lin Shi was prepared to acquire some fresh shrimp and crabs. Lin Shi also reserved 3 tons of various vegetables and gourds and 3 tons of fruits, requesting them to be delivered early the next morning. Afterwards, Lin Shi ran to the pharmacy to start purchasing medicines. Medicines cannot be bought in bulk by individuals like food. Lin Shi ran until nightfall, visiting more than a dozen pharmacies, finally purchasing 50 boxes of antibiotics, 72 boxes of cold medicine, and various antiviral oral solutions. Vitamins priced at $2 per bottle of 100 capsules. Lin Shi bought 126 bottles. But this was still not enough. In the apocalypse, medicines are extremely scarce. Even a cold could take a life in extreme cold. Lin Shi planned to place additional orders online. At this moment, the first batch of goods from the grain and oil wholesale market had already arrived near the warehouse Lin Shi rented. After receiving the call, Lin Shi drove back. Just as he reached the warehouse entrance, his phone rang again. It was Liao Peng calling. Calculating the time, Liao Peng had already been in Shushi for 4 days. It seemed he had made some gains. Lin Shi answered the phone. Liao Peng's voice came through. Boss, I've been all over Shushi these past few days and found 3 places that meet your requirements perfectly. I've sent the detailed information to your WeChat. Take a look. Okay, I have something to attend to right now. I'll call you back later. Lin Shi first went to open the warehouse door and unloaded goods with a dozen workers. It took over 3 hours to unload the 7 containers and place everything into the warehouse. After the workers left, Lin Shi placed his hands on the pile of materials and stored all the supplies into his space. Looking at the supplies in his space, which were only the tip of the iceberg, Lin Shi knew this was just the beginning. After taking a shower, he began to review the information Liao Peng sent. He had to admit he had not misjudged Liao Peng. The 3 locations in the information were all very much in line with Lin Shi's requirements. The terrain was high, the locations were secluded, and there were no tall buildings around, allowing for immediate construction. One of the locations was particularly spacious, located in the eastern outskirts of Shushi. It was more than enough to build a private shelter, let alone a small residential area. Lin Shi suspected that the official shelter from his previous life was built in this area. If that were the case, and it was requisitioned by the authorities later, it would be a significant loss for him, so this location was a no-go. The remaining 2 locations included one on the back mountain of a village in the western suburbs, which was only a few meters high and located several kilometers away from the first open space. There used to be a Taoist temple on the mountain. Although the temple had collapsed, the foundation remained. The last location was in a fishing village called Shidao along the coast of Shushi, where there was a cliff about 10 meters high, and above it was a spacious plot of land where several families used to live before moving away. Lin Shi sent a text to Liao Peng asking him to find someone to survey the mountain where the temple was and check the geology of the cliff. He did not want the foundation of his shelter to collapse while living there. Although the cliff was composed of rock layers, years of wind and waves could have eroded the rock, making it unsuitable for building a shelter. In comparison, the mountain that used to be the temple was more in line with his ideals. However, everything would depend on the... After finishing these tasks, Lin Shi fell asleep. For the next 3 days, all the fresh produce delivered to the warehouse was bought by Lin Shi at the farmer's market, and he directly hired 4 individuals nearby to manage the receiving and transporting of goods. Meanwhile, he went to the lumber market on the 8th. After the extreme cold, humanity lost electricity, and gas pipelines in various countries were frozen and leaked. Humanity's demand for fire was immense. Without fire, they could not cook food or heat meals, and most survivors were living a life of subsistence. Countless people froze to death in their sleep due to the cold. Thus wood became exceedingly precious. Lin Shi directly purchased 500 tons of firewood. Firewood was much cheaper than ordinary boards, consisting mainly of scrap wood and offcuts. Just this amount of wood required 25 containers to load. Fortunately, Lin Shi had ordered a large quantity, otherwise the lumber market would not have been willing to load and unload for him. Next, he bought as much gas canisters and coal as he could. He purchased 800 tons of coal. Following that, he ordered windproof lighters, flint windproof matches, and other supplies. He also ordered cold medicine, antibiotics, disinfectants, emergency bandages, and other medical supplies online. On the 9th, Lin Shi went to the largest generator factory in Sanyuan City and purchased 10 portable generators, 10 home generators, and 2 industrial generators. Except for the industrial generators, which were only for backup in case of high power needs and used diesel, but were noisy, he chose the quietest gasoline generators for the others. Under normal circumstances, the home generators were sufficient. Next came the wires. After the extreme cold apocalypse, even if the circuits had not been destroyed by electromagnetic storms, the exposed wires outside had mostly been frozen. Therefore, Lin Shi had already planned to run the wires indoors, allowing the shelter's power to form a closed loop. To prevent accidents like line aging or short circuits from causing power outages, he purchased tens of thousands of meters of various wires as backup. Next was diesel and gasoline. To use the generators, he needed to stockpile diesel and gasoline. However, the sale of oil was prohibited for private transactions. If he were to fill up a tank and then export it, he didn't know how long it would take to gather enough fuel. So Lin Shi visited the Qingxin pawn shop. You want 100 tons of diesel, 100 tons of gasoline. Do you think I'm running a gas station? Xie Jinxin looked at Lin Shi with "Are you kidding me?" expression. Lin Shi smiled bitterly. 100 tons was not much. A large SUV's tank holds 100 liters, and filling it up more than 10 times would equal a ton. Naturally, he wanted to stockpile as much as possible. No one knew when the apocalypse would end. At least in the 8th year of the apocalypse, there were no signs of the extreme cold coming to an end. If Xie Jinxin couldn't manage it, then he would have to buy a vehicle with a sufficiently large tank and go to different gas stations to collect fuel. Just as Lin Shi was about to leave, Xie Jinxin pondered for a moment and said, "However, I can manage 10 tons for you." Lin Shi's eyes lit up with joy, but he quickly restrained his excitement, noticing Xie Jinxin's scrutinizing gaze. "What price?" 10 tons of gasoline, 10 tons of diesel for 2 kilograms of gold. 2 kilograms of gold was worth over 8,000. Goodness, the price of diesel was less than 1,000 per ton, and gasoline was just over 1,000. Even if both were 10 tons each, it would only amount to a little over 2,000. Xie Jinxin had directly quadrupled the price. "Don't complain about the price. I am not normally in this line of work, and am taking a significant risk. If you don't want it, then forget it," Xie Jinxin said. Naturally, Lin Shi would not be easily controlled. He still had some gold bars in his space. However, how much to trade had to be dictated by him. 20 tons of gasoline, 20 tons of diesel, and he'll give you 5 kilograms of gold. Fortune favors the bold. Xie Jinxin gritted his teeth and agreed. Seeing Xie Jinxin agree so readily, Lin Shi's eyes flickered and he asked, "Can you get me some medicines?" "The price can be discussed. Tell me, what exactly are you preparing all these things for?" The items Lin Shi requested became increasingly bizarre. Although asking a client about the purpose was a taboo, he was simply too curious. Weapons, cold weather, clothing, oil, and medicine. What was all this for? Did he really intend to settle in Antarctica, as this young man claimed? Xie Jinxin began to ponder this outlandish possibility. Lin Shi naturally would not reveal his true intentions, didn't I say it? To settle in Antarctica. Next, Lin Shi sent Xie Jinxin a list of antibiotics, cold medicines, trauma medications, and so forth. Xie Jinxin was skeptical, but negotiated the price with Lin Shi. Leaving the pawnshop, Lin Shi thought for a moment and decided to go to the electronics market to buy some appliances. In the apocalypse, he would need many items for years, and he had to buy several of each essential appliance. Soon Lin Shi arrived at the largest electronics mall in Sanyuan City. Arriving at the electronics store, Lin Shi bought 20 of each item: rice cookers, induction cookers, washing machines, dryers, hair dryers, air purifiers, and electric kettles. He also purchased 30 of each: electric heater, electric blanket, warm air fan, and water purifier. Next, he went to a nearby store to buy pots, bowls, and plates, all in alloy or stainless steel. On the 10th, Lin Shi rushed to the largest shopping mall. Although he already had cold-resistant clothing that was meant for hunting and searching for supplies, Lin Shi still needed to buy some everyday clothes and other warm items. He first visited a home goods store, purchasing 20 sets of down comforters, 20 cotton blankets, 20 wool blankets, and 20 sets of bedding. Then he went to a well-reputed brand store. The down jackets and windbreakers here were said to be specially made for Antarctic expedition teams. They were made from the most advanced thermal insulation materials, second only to military cold-resistant clothing. As spring approached, all winter apparel was on sale. Most items on the shelves had been replaced with spring collections. Lin Shi walked over to the winter clothing section to browse. Two salespeople were chatting idly in the store. Since this brand store only sold high-end products, even a single coat could cost several thousand or tens of thousands. Therefore, not many people usually came in. Seeing Lin Shi head straight for the discount section, the two salespeople exchanged looks of indifference and continued their conversation. After looking for a while, Lin Shi couldn't tell which was the warmest, so he asked a salesperson which of these is the warmest. The salesperson, with his back to Lin Shi, rolled his eyes and turned to say, "These down jackets and windbreakers are quite..." This was clearly not the answer Lin Shi was looking for. "I meant which one is the warmest, capable of keeping warm in -50 degrees. The salesperson cursed under his breath, casually pointing out a few items. Lin Shi pointed at one of the items the salesperson indicated. "Bring me the XL size to try on." The salesperson was already growing impatient. A poor person buying discounted items expects so much. The salesperson glanced at the down jacket on the rack, which was size L, and said, "Try it on first. If you like it, it'll get you the right size." At this moment, Lin Shi could sense the salesperson's clear impatience. Frowning slightly, he was about to lose his temper when two people walked in through the store door. It was Su Feifei, accompanied by a tall, thin man. It seemed like they were regulars, as another salesperson joyfully, "Hello, Mr. Li. We have many new arrivals in the store. Please take a look." This attitude starkly contrasted with the sullen demeanor of the salesperson next to Lin Shi. Especially seeing that his colleague was about to earn a big commission, the salesperson beside Lin Shi's face grew even darker. At this moment, Su Feifei also noticed Lin Shi and spoke up, "Lin Shi, you're here too." Lin Shi merely nodded, not looking at her anymore, and asked the salesperson to bring him the XL size. Reluctantly, the salesperson went to get it. Noticing Su Feifei staring at Lin Shi, Li Duoyu, who came with her, was displeased and asked Feifei, "Who is that?" Su Feifei seemed to come back to her senses and replied, "He's my high school classmate." Although Lin Shi had left them behind at the club last time, Su Feifei always believed it was Zhao Xiao who offended Lin Shi, causing him to take it out on them. Lin Shi was wealthy and handsome. In Su Feifei's dictionary, a man who was both handsome and rich deserved tolerance no matter his actions. The incident where Lin Shi was kidnapped by robbers at the bank had already spread among classmates. Also circulating was the news of Lin Shi purchasing 25 million in gold bars at the bank. Everyone believed that someone who could buy 25 million in gold bars for investment must have a family fortune close to 100 million. Su Feifei's eyes sparkled as she looked at Lin Shi. The salesperson brought Lin Shi the jacket he wanted, and Lin Shi immediately took off his coat to try it on. Su Feifei glanced at Lin Shi again, realizing that his physique had unconsciously improved. Beneath a thin base layer, his chest muscles were subtly visible. This made Su Feifei's face unconsciously blush. She glanced again at the thin and dry Li Duoyu beside her and felt that Lin Shi was the better fit for her. She walked over to Lin Shi and complimented Lin Shi, "You look really good in that outfit." Li Duoyu's expression darkened. Lin Shi nodded and pointed at a few items the salesperson had just mentioned, saying to the salesperson, "Get me that one in XL to try on. And that one, and that one." The salesperson wore a sour face, suppressing their anger while getting Lin Shi 3 more items. Lin Shi tried on each one, wanting to confirm the size and flexibility of the clothes. After all, he would have to wear them for the next few years or even decades. But the salesperson did not feel the same. She thought Lin Shi was just a poor person causing trouble, taking too long to decide on a discounted item. Such customers were her least favorite. If there weren't multiple customers in the store at this moment, she would have spoken rudely. Su Feifei kept praising Lin Shi for looking suitable. But Lin Shi found the woman beside him very annoying. Just as he was about to dismiss her, Li Duyu, who had been ignored, finally couldn't take it anymore. Fei Fei, if your classmate can't afford clothes, I can cover the bill, so he doesn't have to trouble the salesperson. The salesperson beside Lin Shi immediately cast a grateful glance at Li Duyu. Su Fei Fei's expression became somewhat hard to describe. Lin Shi was broke. Lin Shi had just invested 25 million in gold, for goodness sake. Although she didn't understand why Lin Shi was so attached to discounted items, Su Fei Fei thought it reflected Lin Shi's virtue of thrift. Li Duyu, don't talk nonsense, Su Fei Fei said. Seeing Su Fei Fei still defending Lin Shi, Li Duyu looked at Lin Shi with contempt and spoke, without holding back, am I talking nonsense? Just a poor loser who can only afford discounted items. Are you going to flaunt yourself wearing discounted clothes? Su Fei Fei frowned. Lin Shi isn't. Lin Shi directly interrupted Su Fei Fei, addressing the disdainful Li Duyu. Are you saying you are willing to cover my bill? Lin Shi could easily detect the mockery and provocation from the man named Li Duyu. It was clear that he was yet another suitor of Su Fei Fei. Li Duyu's disdain grew even more prominent. He threw Su Fei Fei a look that seemed to say, see, I was right. Then, as if throwing a charity, he said, write the discounted items you like, it'll cover them all. Lin Shi sized Li Duyu up and said, do you have money? Let's see if you keep your word. Li Duyu, like a cat with its tail stepped on, raised his voice, of course. You can pick as many as you want, to pay for it. Li Duyu lacked nothing, but was not short on money. He had a monthly allowance of 3,000, and spending 2,000 on a few discounted clothes was nothing. To maintain his rich second-generation image in front of the girl he liked, he could easily afford this amount. He realized Lin Shi was trying to get this regular customer to pay. The salesperson beside them looked at Lin Shi with eyes full of disdain and contempt. Lin Shi smiled. He wasn't just buying a few items, but rather dozens, or even hundreds. A generous fool delivering himself to his doorstep was an opportunity he wouldn't pass up. He said to the sales associate beside him, for each of those pieces I just tried on, pack up 50 of each for me. The sales associate thought she must have misheard. Lin Shi repeated himself. What he said is that he'll pay for these styles. Both sales associates were stunned by Lin Shi's audacity. Their expressions clearly conveyed disbelief. How could someone be so shameless? The sales associate remained still looking at Li Duyu. Lin Shi turned to the astonished Li Duyu, a mocking smile mirroring his expression. I just asked you, you said you could afford to buy more, you wouldn't be unable to pay, would you? This statement effectively returned Li Duyu's earlier words to him. Lin Shi had tried on 4 items, asking for 50 of each meant 200 pieces total, and even if they were all discounted, each would average around 3,000 yuan. That totals approximately 6,000 yuan. Li Duyu's monthly allowance was 3,000 yuan, which was barely enough for himself. Lin Shi was about to spend 2 months of his allowance in one go. Are you toying with me? Li Duyu's anger surged, feeling that Lin Shi was mocking him just to embarrass him in front of Su Fei Fei. It wasn't that he couldn't come up with 6,000 yuan, but there was no way he would spend that much on a man. What normal person buys 50 of the same item? What I just mentioned were the pieces you wanted to buy. Even Su Fei Fei felt Lin Shi was intentionally making things difficult for Li Duyu. Who buys 200 pieces of such warm coats? They wouldn't wear them all in 10 or 20 years. Moreover, after so many years they'd be out of style. However, she said nothing. Lin Shi was a man she had her eye on, so she naturally wouldn't publicly contradict him. Lin Shi stated, I want to buy exactly 200 pieces. Li Duyu, furious to the point of laughing, retorted, you a broke loser buying discounted goods can afford 200 pieces. If you can buy 200 pieces, I'll kneel and call you grandpa. Lin Shi chuckled his mockery unabashed, calling, who knows if after you say that you won't just be like a fart blown away. Oh no, at least a fart makes a sound, but your words are even less than a fart. Upon hearing Lin Shi's vivid metaphor, Su Fei Fei couldn't help but laugh. The laughter of the girl he liked wounded Li Duyu's pride. This made Li Duyu explode, raising his voice. Nonsense. I always keep my word. But how can you prove that you're not just trying to trick me into saying you want to buy 200 pieces? Li Duyu's voice attracted the attention of a couple of passers-by. Lin Shi replied, it's simple, I'll buy these 200 pieces first, and if I can afford it, all my expenses in this mall today will be on you. What if you can't afford it? The stakes had risen between them, and Li Duyu certainly wouldn't let himself lose. Lin Shi said, if I can't afford it, you can do whatever you want. Unbeknownst to them, the number of onlookers outside the store had unexpectedly increased. Many people pointed and whispered about them. In front of so many people, Li Duyu could not afford to lose face. He raised his chin, looking at Lin Shi through his nostrils, saying, all right, I agree. If you can't afford it, you must kowtow to me and call me grandpa 3 times. Li Duyu didn't believe that this broke loser could really afford clothes worth hundreds of thousands. Today he would tear this broke loser's face off and step on it. Lin Shi turned to the sales associate and said, 50 pieces of each style, pack them up right now. The sales associate rolled her eyes and said, displeased, sir, these clothes will cost around 6,000 yuan in total. The implication was that if Lin Shi didn't have money, he shouldn't be acting out and making demands. 200 pieces was no small number. If they called someone to bring them from the warehouse and Lin Shi didn't buy, they would face criticism or even punishment. Lin Shi pulled out a card from his pocket. Let's settle the bill, I'll pay by card. The sales associate's eyes widened when she saw his black card. She didn't dare to be careless and took it carefully with both hands to examine it. Indeed, it was a black card reserved for those with deposits over 10 million. Having been in this line of work for so long, she had some sense. Suddenly realizing they had misjudged him, she quickly revealed the most genuine smile. Please wait a moment, have a seat, I'll get the warehouse to bring the items over. Saying this, she led Lin Shi to sit and poured him tea, completely changing her attitude from before. 200 pieces. Even with discounted promotional products, this quantity would earn them a hefty commission. Another sales associate immediately called the warehouse. Lin Shi directly said, no need to deliver here, send it to my residence. The sales associate quickly agreed and noted down the address Lin Shi provided. Soon the total price was calculated 582366 yuan, and the sales associate bent down to bring the card machine to Lin Shi. Lin Shi entered his PIN, received the receipt signed, and completed the entire process smoothly. The sales associate was delighted at the thought of the generous commission she would earn, but Lin Shi's next words sent her into an ice-cold shock. Now call your manager over. I want to file a complaint against you. The sales associate, who had maintained a poor attitude towards Lin Shi, panicked, immediately hastily apologizing and promising him various gifts. Li Duyu, who had been waiting for Lin Shi to embarrass himself, was dumbfounded. In disbelief, he pulled the busy sales associate serving Lin Shi aside. Did he really buy 200 pieces? Let me see the receipt. After looking at the receipt, Li Duyu still found it hard to believe. If he could spend 582366 yuan on a bet, why was he still buying clothes from the clearance discount section? Was he out of his mind? Li Duyu felt Lin Shi was targeting him. He always believed that Lin Shi buying 200 pieces of the same clothing was just to annoy him, not because he genuinely needed them. However, Lin Shi truly needed them. The bet was just an added annoyance to this guy's incessant chatter. Did you see clearly now? Can we fulfill the bet now? Lin Shi looked at Li Duyu, who was repeatedly checking the receipt, with an inscrutable smile. Li Duyu ground his teeth, weighing the pros and cons in his mind. If he backed out now, Su Feifei would definitely have no chance. If he didn't back out today, it would inevitably end with him being taken for a ride. Just then, two young girls walked into the store, heading straight for the three of them. To be precise, they walked directly towards Lin Shi. The two girls were tall, elegantly made up, and their looks were on par with Su Feifei. Even Li Duyu, who was in a dilemma, couldn't help but be drawn in by their appearance. One of the curly-haired girls flashed a dazzling smile and asked Lin Shi, "Excuse me, are you Lin Shi?" "I am." Lin Shi nodded, though he didn't recognize either of them. The two girls wore expressions of delight. The straight-haired girl exclaimed in surprise, "I'm your fan. You're even more handsome in person than in photos. I'm so happy to meet you." Lin Shi took a moment to understand. It seemed that after the bank robbery incident, his popularity hadn't faded. The two girls sat on either side of Lin Shi and struck up a conversation. Shortly after, several other girls walked into the store, also heading towards Lin Shi. It turned out that most of the people who had been watching outside earlier recognized Lin Shi, just initially unsure. Everyone quickly learned about the bet between Lin Shi and Li Duyu through Lin Shi's deliberate promotion. Some girls even started filming short videos to ride on Lin Shi's popularity. This left Li Duyu, who was still considering reneging on the bet, infuriated. So many people knew about his bet with Lin Shi. If he tried to back out, he'd be the laughingstock of the entire city. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Li Duyu could afford to lose money, but he could not afford to lose face. He decisively took out his card and threw it onto Lin Shi. "A bet is a bet. From now on, all your expenses in this mall will be on me." Although he said this, his heart was already filled with hatred for Lin Shi. "Oh." A group of girls surrounding Lin Shi began to cheer. "Then I won't be polite. Everyone, I still have some things to buy. Goodbye." Lin Shi waved goodbye to the girls and walked toward the exit. Li Duyu followed, as did Su Feifei. Next, Lin Shi went to a men's underwear store. He ordered 1,000 sets of thermal underwear, 1,000 pairs of thermal socks, and 2,000 pairs of underwear. In total, it cost over 26000. Originally, Lin Shi planned to buy these items at a wholesale market, but now, using someone else's money, why not spend it? Buying so much in one go stunned the store clerk, who confirmed several times before calling the manufacturer to arrange delivery. The store did not have that much stock. The delivery address was naturally Lin Shi's warehouse. Watching Lin Shi waste his money, Li Duyu glared at him, his eyes blazing with anger, and gritted his teeth as he whispered, "Isn't this enough? Let me remind you, know when to stop." He was even more convinced that Lin Shi was messing with him. What normal person buys so much underwear? There was not only his pocket money for the month on this card, but also an overdraft limit of 5000. Now Lin Shi had drained his living expenses for the month, and he would have to live off nothing. Lin Shi ignored Li Duyu's warning, squinted his eyes, revealing a set of white teeth, and smiled brightly. "You said it today, all my expenses in this mall will be covered by you." "What? Are you going back on your word?" Lin Shi's voice was loud, and Su Feifei immediately looked at Li Duyu, her eyes filled with disdain and disgust. She hated men who lacked integrity the most. Li Duyu never expected Lin Shi to swipe his card without giving him any face. His expression twisted as he pointed a finger at Lin Shi. Fine, very fine. Just you wait. Li Duyu glared at Lin Shi fiercely, not even bothering with the card anymore, and turned to leave. That look suggested he wouldn't let it go easily. Seeing someone leave, Su Feifei reminded Li Duoy's father is said to be a shareholder in a listed company. Oh, Lin Shi casually acknowledged with a sound, knowing full well. After witnessing unimaginable darkness in the apocalypse, the methods of these young people in the peaceful world seemed trivial in his eyes. There were still guns in his space, oh, what was there to fear? Moreover, in 2 months, Li Duoyu, the rich second generation, would not be one anymore. Lin Shi smiled nonchalantly and continued shopping. He ordered 100 pairs of snow boots, 50 thermos bottles, 100 backpacks, thermal hats, gloves, and so on. Only when Li Duoy's card was maxed out did Lin Shi stop. He threw the card to Su Feifei, who had been following him. Don't follow me anymore. After saying that, he left the mall, leaving Su Feifei fuming. After spending an entire afternoon with Lin Shi at the mall, her high heels had worn her feet raw, and Lin Shi didn't even treat her to a meal. He hadn't been like this before. Su Feifei stomped her foot in anger. Lin Shi returned to the warehouse, where it was filled with the purchased electronics and the last batch of fish. The owner kindly placed ice cubes in each box of fish. There were still many medicines Lin Shi had ordered online a few days prior. After dismissing the delivery workers, he collected all the goods in the warehouse into his space. Now he had over 200 boxes of cold medicine and hundreds of antibiotics and medications for viral and bacterial infections. He had prepared several thousand bandages and wound dressings. He also purchased 200 boxes of frostbite ointment. He took out the shopping list he had made earlier and crossed off the items he had already bought. Next, he still needed some windproof lamp sleds and other outdoor supplies, along with some bathing items. Lin Shi ordered these online as well. Shampoo, shower gel, toothbrushes, toothpaste, towels, etc. In fact, these items were considered luxuries in the apocalypse. Lin Shi hadn't initially planned to buy them. Survivors after extreme cold basically do not take showers to avoid freezing. The grease and dirt on their bodies help increase warmth and protect their skin. Besides, where could one find hot water for a shower in extreme cold? Drinking a sip of hot water was already a luxury. In his past life, Lin Shi had only washed himself a few times with snow during the 8 years of the apocalypse. But now things were different. He had been reborn and had time to prepare in advance. How could he not allow himself to live a little better? Then Lin Shi bought kerosene lamps, windproof lamps, moisture-proof mats, sleds, skis, batteries, radios, purification tablets, and more from an outdoor sports brand store online. Skis are an essential mode of transportation in extreme cold. When the extreme cold arrives, blizzards continue endlessly, and the thickness of the snow nearly blankets the entire Tianjin star. At first, the freshly fallen snow was particularly soft. Stepping into it would cause one to sink, let alone vehicles. Traveling was nearly impossible. As the snow gradually solidified, most vehicles had long been submerged under the increasingly thick snow layer. Even those that were preserved would fail to start due to the extreme low temperatures. Or if they did start, they would skid and crash. The arrival of the extreme cold apocalypse sent human technology back several hundred years. Besides ordinary skis, Lin Shi also bought 20 snowmobiles. These were the best means of transportation in extreme cold. Now most places rent them out to those who come to play in the snow as toys. Good snowmobiles can reach speeds of up to 200 kilometers per hour in the snow. They are not expensive. Several tens of thousands is already considered very good. The only downside is that they are too conspicuous, and the noise they make is the same as ordinary motorcycles. Lin Shi wouldn't take them out unless he was in a hurry. After finishing these tasks, Lin Shi casually washed up and went to sleep. In the night, Lin Shi suddenly opened his eyes. He reached for his phone and glanced at the time. It was already past 2 a.m. However, at this time, Lin Shi heard the sound of truck wheels moving. The sound grew closer and closer. In the darkness, Lin Shi moved stealthily like a cat to the warehouse door. By the light of the moon, Lin Shi saw that indeed a large truck was coming from afar. It stopped right at the entrance of Lin Shi's warehouse. Lin Shi unconsciously narrowed his eyes, feeling alert. Although he had ordered many things these past few days, what could be delivered stealthily in the middle of the night? The image of old Xia appeared in Lin Shi's mind. Could it be the diesel and gasoline he ordered a few days ago? Sure enough, just as he thought this, 2 people jumped off the truck. Both were dressed in black and wore masks. One of them had a physique quite similar to Xia Jinxin. Lin Shi did not let down his guard. Instead, he took out a handgun from his space. Xia Jinxin got out of the car and checked the house number at the warehouse entrance. Seeing the address was correct, he gently knocked on the big iron door. Knock, knock, knock. Xia Jinxin gently tapped on the door. The small door beside the main entrance silently opened. What is it? Lin Shi's half-hidden figure in the shadows coldly stared at the visitor. Oh my, you scared me to death in the middle of the night. Xia Jinxin patted his chest. Your cargo has been delivered. Seeing that the two did not move, Lin Shi closed the small door and opened the main door. The truck drove directly into the warehouse. Xie Jinxin patted the side of the truck and said the goods are all here. Biao. The man named Biao was the truck driver, a robust and tall figure. Biao opened the back door of the truck, revealing barrels of oil packed tightly inside. Brother, check the goods. Xie Jinxin gestured to Lin Shi. No need, I trust you. Lin Shi did not step into the dimly lit cargo area. Xie Jinxin smiled and waved at Biao, who walked into the truck alone, pulling out an unloading ramp, rolling down barrel after barrel of oil. Xie Jinxin caught them below and arranged them. Lin Shi stood by, watching with his arms crossed. He would never turn his back on someone he did not trust. He had traded over 10 million gold coins worth of goods with Xie Jinxin. Money could entice anyone, and in the face of sufficient profit, anyone could turn into a devil. Lin Shi certainly would not place his safety in the character of Xie Jinxin. It was not until over 3 hours later that they both breathlessly unloaded all the barrels. Xie Jinxin bade farewell to Lin Shi and got into the truck with Biao driving away. Lin Shi kept his eyes on the vehicle until it disappeared from sight before retracting his gaze. It seemed Lin Shi had underestimated the intentions of others, but being cautious was never a mistake. He did not feel he had done anything wrong. In the truck, Xie Jinxin, who had been keeping an eye on the rearview mirror, did not look away until he could no longer see Lin Shi's figure. Biao, who was driving, grumbled, "Old Xie, are you being too cautious? We clearly had an opportunity just now." Having done business for so many years, Xie Jinxin was certainly not a good person. He would seize any chance for a black market deal, but only when he had a high probability of success. Maintaining a good reputation requires two conditions. First, sincerely completing transactions. Second, being clean when doing black market deals. Xie Jinxin smiled. It's not that I'm too cautious, but that young man is too wary. Didn't you notice how vigilant he was towards us the entire time? Biao glanced at the now invisible rearview mirror, unconvinced, and replied, "He's just a bean sprout. I could crush him effortlessly." Xie Jinxin slowly pulled out a cigarette and lit one, appearing relaxed, yet with a serious glint in his eyes. "I don't think so. When I stood next to him, I had a feeling that any move I made would lead to my immediate death." Biao's expression became more serious. "Really? I saw he had no weapon in hand. Even if he were to draw a gun, it couldn't be faster than you, right?" Having been in this line of work for so many years, Xie Jinxin often encountered buyers in the black market who, after receiving goods, would rather not pay the remaining amount and just want to shoot instead. Xie Jinxin's quick and stable draw technique had kept him safe all these years. Yet he claimed that his draw was not faster than that young man's. How could this not astonish Biao, who had known Xie Jinxin for many years? "You should know that my instincts have saved me many times." Xie Jinxin exhaled a puff of smoke. "Have you forgotten about old Jean's disappearance? That day I sensed that old Jean was about to act against this person, and I casually mentioned it. But since then, old Jean disappeared while he remained unscathed, which speaks for itself, doesn't it? To handle things so cleanly in Sanyuan City, it's not that I overestimate this kid, I feel I'm actually underestimating him. We agreed before coming out that we would just test for opportunities, and if there were none, we would leave. It has been proven that not acting was the right choice. If we had acted, at least one person would have to account for it." Biao opened his mouth to say something, but ultimately did not. Xie Jinxin extinguished his cigarette, and looked at Biao, whose face still bore some disbelief. "Having known each other for so many years, you know I have a good eye for people. Trust me, don't provoke that kid in the future. I have a premonition that as long as he doesn't die, he will never remain anonymous. By the way, let's stock up on some diesel and gasoline. We should prepare more goods lately. I always feel uneasy, as if something is about to happen." After securely closing the warehouse door and checking that all the barrels were in order with no micro cameras or surveillance devices installed, did Lin Shi finally feel at ease. He opened a few barrels of oil for inspection, and it turned out that these oils were all fine. A total of 400 barrels were neatly stacked into a square formation. After confirming that there was no one outside the warehouse multiple times, Lin Shi placed his hand on one of the barrels and silently murmured, "Item copy." The item copy quantity on the interface of the Treasure Basin changed from 22 to 21, and before his eyes, with a flash of golden light, 400 more barrels appeared out of thin air. Lin Shi inspected the replicas. Everything from the barrels to the oil inside was perfectly duplicated. 20 tons of gasoline and 20 tons of diesel had turned into 40 tons of gasoline and 40 tons of diesel. Excitement sparkled in his bright eyes. Just 20 tons of diesel and 20 tons of gasoline wouldn't be sufficient. What he needed were supplies that could last for decades in the harsh cold to come. In the future, the shelter would rely on these oils to power the generators, and his snowmobile also needed fuel to start. Thus, when negotiating the deal with Xie Jinxin, Lin Shi had planned to use his item copy ability to duplicate the oil. Now he had 40 tons of gasoline and 40 tons of diesel, but that was still not enough to satisfy Lin Shi. Could the replicas of gold be copied again? And what about the copies of the copies? Could replicas be replicated? Previously, Lin Sure had not used the gold replicas for further copying because they were difficult to circulate. But oil, even if it were copies of copies, as long as the items were the same, it would not affect their use at all. Lin Sure connected the two piles of oil together. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sure took out the generator and some supplies from the space and placed them with the barrels of oil. Once again, he used item copy. With a flash of golden light, the originally 800 barrels in the warehouse increased by 400 more in the golden glow. However, it turned out that only the original 400 barrels of oil could be copied. The replicated barrels could not be copied again. Lin Sure felt somewhat disappointed. If the copies could be replicated, he should have gotten 800 barrels this time, and the next time, it would be 3,200 barrels. After several duplications, he would have an endless supply of oil. Moreover, different supplies could not be copied simultaneously. Now he had grasped the limitations of the Treasure Basin's item copy function. First, replicas could not be used for space upgrades. Second, only one type of item can be copied at a time. Third, items that have been copied once can be copied again, but the replicas produced cannot be copied again. Even though they appeared to be identical, the items produced were not recognized by the Treasure Basin. There must be some differences between the two. With a wave of his hand, he placed the duplicated oil barrels and the original oil barrel into the space. Since the replicas could no longer be copied, he would need to use the duplicates first and then continue to replicate after use. It seems that the current number of item duplications might not be sufficient. The current interface of the Treasure Gathering Basin is Treasure Gathering Basin Storage Space. 969696 required financial points for upgrade. 320 function item duplication. 20 required financial points for upgrade. 58500. When the end of the world arrives, he would need to find some gold, silver, and jewels to upgrade the basin. After taking a brief nap, early the next morning, Lin Sure received a call from Liao Peng while doing his usual morning exercises. Liao Peng brought updates from two locations regarding the geological surveys. As Lin Sure had speculated, the cliff's rocks showed signs of sand erosion, but with the current climate, living there for decades would not be an issue. However, it was uncertain how long it could withstand extreme cold. To his surprise, the old side of the temple had a lot of granite inside, making it very stable. Thus, Lin Sure decisively chose the old temple site. He asked Liao Peng to negotiate the price, while Lin Sure booked a flight for the next morning to Shushi Online. He needed to see the situation for himself and then design a shelter based on the terrain. The warehouse needed supervision, so Lin Sure ordered many items online that required a signature upon delivery, along with some goods from stores that had yet to be delivered, which also needed unloading and storage. After contemplating, Lin Sure hired someone completely unfamiliar to the group of movers to guard the warehouse. He also reminded the movers to watch the quantity of the goods. With everything in place, Lin Sure set off with peace of mind and boarded the flight to Shushi. Shushi is indeed the hottest city in Qiming country. It was only March, yet everywhere there were girls in cool short sleeves and shorts exuberantly flaunting their youthful bodies. As soon as Lin Sure got off the plane, he took off his outer jacket, revealing a loose short-sleeve shirt. The contours of muscles were faintly visible on his arms and chest, though not overly pronounced. To an outsider, he merely appeared to have a good physique. Only Lin Sure knew that after more than 10 days of training, his body was now completely different from when he had just been reborn. Lin Sure was very strict with himself, increasing his training load every day compared to the previous day. Now his strength was no less than that of those who had been working out in gyms for years. This was because he was not training for physical fitness, but for battle. He aimed for every inch of his muscles and bones to be able to unleash their maximum strength at the slightest thought. This required keeping his muscles extremely resilient, increasing strength, while ensuring flexibility was not compromised by excessive bulk. With just over 2 months left, time was not abundant. He had to cherish every single day to grow stronger. The harsh reality of the apocalypse was not that having enough supplies guaranteed a good life. On the contrary, having ample supplies without strength would be far more tragic than having nothing at all. Liao Peng arrived early at the airport exit to await Lin Sure's disembarkation. Upon spotting Lin Sure amidst the crowd, Liao Peng hurriedly raised and waved the sign he was holding. Lin Sure quickly saw Liao Peng, and after meeting up, the two left the airport and got into a car. To find a suitable homestead, Liao Peng had even rented a vehicle for convenience. On the way, Liao Peng took the initiative to break the ice and strengthen their relationship. "Boss, let me first take you to find a place to settle down." "No need, just tell me about the situation regarding that old dojo site." Liao Peng replied earnestly. "I spoke with the owner of the land. It is situated on a mountain in a remote location, and the asking price is not very high. Only 5,000. I managed to negotiate it down to 4,800 for you." This price was even cheaper than Lin Sure had anticipated. In fact, the housing prices in Shushi were not high. Even in the city center, it was only over 2,000 per square meter. It could not compare with Sanyuan City at all. The old dojo site, being in a mountainous area, was understandably cheaper. "I saw from your information that it covers over 300 square meters. Lin Sure inquired. "That's correct. In fact, the outer area of the homestead has several hundred square meters. Although you can't build a house, it's great for a yard to grow some vegetables. Lin Sure nodded. The vehicle traveled for nearly an hour before arriving at the foot of the old dojo site. Indeed, as Liao Peng had said, it was a village. The village consisted of low houses, the tallest of which was only 5 stories. Surrounded mostly by mountains, the village was nestled within a ring of hills with only one opening. This terrain was very favorable, able to block a lot of wind and snow. Upon seeing the vehicle enter the village, several people stepped out of their homes to observe. The village was not large, with only about 100 households scattered around. Lin Sure was quite satisfied with this. Fewer people meant fewer troubles. Liao Peng had run errands here several times in the past few days, and his face was already recognized by the villagers. However, Lin Sure was a stranger, and several aunties were whispering and pointing at the two of them. Due to the distance, Lin Sure could not hear what they were saying. "Boss, those are the villagers. I took a look, and this village has a total of 96 households with a population of no more than 400. Lin Sure nodded to indicate he understood. "It'll take about 10 minutes to drive up this road." Liao Peng pointed to a narrow cement road that could only fit one vehicle. The mountain wasn't high, only about 10 meters above the ground, so they soon reached the top. The summit was surprisingly flat, contrary to expectations of ruggedness. The area was roughly over an acre. The previously built temple had collapsed, leaving behind wood bricks and half-collapsed walls. These were not issues; rebuilding would be convenient. Lin Sure looked around with satisfaction. "Not bad. When can we handle the paperwork?" "The owner of this homestead is out of town. I had to put in a lot of effort to find his contact information. After settling the price with him yesterday, he said he would return as quickly as possible to handle the paperwork. This morning when I contacted him, he was already on the train, and he is expected to arrive here this afternoon." "Good. Then let's head down the mountain now." Building the shelter is a major project. With tight deadlines and heavy tasks to complete the shelter within 2 months, sufficient manpower must be arranged. The more people, the greater the strength. Lin Sure already had a preliminary idea for the shelter in his mind and was planning how many people to hire. The two returned to the foot of the mountain. To handle the land transfer procedures, they needed to go to the city, so Liao Peng and the owner agreed to meet directly at the relevant department in the city in the afternoon, and they did not linger in the village. The land transfer process went very smoothly. The former owner was a middle-aged Taoist priest lacking the ethereal demeanor and was somewhat plump. After signing the transfer contract, he hesitated to speak. But ultimately, he said nothing and hurriedly left after receiving the money. This left Lin Sure with a slight sense of unease. "Liao Peng, have you inquired why that temple was abandoned?" Liao Peng was taken aback by Lin Sure's question. He had never inquired about it. Being a person of many talents, Liao Peng immediately thought of something and quickly took out his phone to call the Taoist from earlier. 30 minutes later, Lin Sure, Liao Peng, and the plump Taoist were seated in a restaurant. The plump Taoist was shoveling meat into his mouth while mumbling, "This is how it is. I didn't intend to hide anything, though I've just been really short on cash lately." After speaking, he cast a guilty glance at Lin Sure. Lin Sure's expression remained calm, revealing no signs of anger or joy. It turned out that the Taoist had purchased that piece of land 5 years ago. According to him, he wanted to find a piece of land with good feng shui to build a Taoist temple, so he set his sights on. He first spent a large sum to pave a cement road, then constructed the temple. Everything went smoothly during this process, and the plump Taoist originally thought he would retire in this temple. Unexpectedly, not long after the temple was completed, villagers from the village below the mountain came to his temple with several people. They claimed that the dragon vein of their village was beneath that mountain and that the Taoist temple was suppressing it. The land had originally been purchased from the villagers, and at the time of purchase, the plump Taoist had made it very clear that he was building a temple. The villager at that time did not object to the construction. During the construction process, no one stopped him. It was only after the temple was built that they came forward with their complaints. The construction of the temple had depleted most of the plump Taoist's savings, making it impossible to tear it down. Initially, the plump Taoist ignored the group of villagers. His temple was legal and compliant, and they could not forcibly demolish it. However, things were not as simple as he thought. From that point on, everyday villagers stood guard at the entrance of the cement road, preventing any vehicles from going up the mountain. The plump Taoist opened the temple to attract patrons, and without them, he lost a significant source of income. Moreover, there were elderly women who came daily to curse at the temple's entrance. They couldn't be driven away, nor could they be silenced, leaving the plump Taoist feeling overwhelmed. After several negotiations with the villagers, he eventually paid them 20,000 yuan, which seemed to resolve the issue. Just when he thought the matter was settled, a month passed, and more villagers blocked the road. Furious, the plump Taoist confronted the village chief. To his shock, the village chief shamelessly stated that the last payment of 20,000 yuan was merely last month's fee, and that from now on he would have to pay them 20,000 every month. This infuriated the plump Taoist, who immediately reported it to the police. However, when the security personnel arrived, the entire village, from the elderly to toddlers, all stood up to testify, claiming that the money was a gift from the plump Taoist to the whole village. This indicated that the villagers had likely pulled such stunts before. The 20,000 yuan involved extortion and was enough to file a case. After receiving the money, each household divided it among themselves, giving 50 yuan per person. Even more infuriating was that most of the villagers were elderly in their 60s and 70s, or even 80s, along with a few small children. The security personnel could do nothing about these elderly people. They could only arrest a few of the able-bodied young men in the village, but they would be released shortly after. Afterwards, the villagers became more brazen. Every day, several elderly women would sit in the tricycles of village residents at the entrance of the temple, demanding 100 yuan each before they would leave. If the plump Taoist called the police, they would cry, claiming they had fallen and hurt themselves at the temple, demanding the plump Taoist take responsibility. Forced into a corner, the plump Taoist closed the temple, largely isolating himself, but this did not stop these troublesome villagers. Every few days, the temple would lose power or water, either due to cut wires or blocked pipes. It was needless to say that the villagers were behind it. Later, the plump Taoist spent money to buy surveillance equipment, which finally caught the person cutting the wires. He sent the individual to the security bureau thinking he had gained an advantage, only to find that this had stirred up a hornet's nest. From then on, the villagers intensified their tactics. Their methods were endless, and he was exhausted both mentally and physically, fighting against 400 people. Eventually, he had no choice but to abandon the temple and seek another path. Liao Peng listened to the plump Taoist's story, feeling both angry and guilty, even avoiding Lin Shi's gaze. "I'm sorry, boss, it's all my fault for not inquiring thoroughly." He was earning such a high salary from Lin Shi, yet he messed things up, feeling deeply ashamed. "They'll look for other suitable places. As for this land, just deduct it from my salary, boss." Lin Shi glanced sideways. This made Lin Shi look at Liao Peng in a new light. Although he had offered Liao Peng an annual salary of 500,000, it was merely an empty promise. Even though he had not received the money, yet he was willing to use his 500,000 annual salary to compensate for this mistake, which was not something an ordinary person would have the courage to propose. Lin Shi waved his hand. "No need, just this piece of land. It's getting late. You contact a reliable construction team first, and we'll start work tomorrow." At this, both Liao Peng and the plump Taoist were astonished. "Boss, I have a solution. Just do as I say." Lin Shi stood up, ending the meal. This matter actually didn't need to be resolved at all. Build it, and then find trouble. Would Lin Shi be afraid? Naturally not. By the time the shelter was completed, it would be at least 2 months later. When the extreme cold arrived, these villagers would be too preoccupied with their own survival. As for dealing with malicious people, Lin Shi had plenty of experience. He only needed to be more ruthless than them. "Wait." The plump Taoist swallowed hard, then pulled out a yellowed book from his inner clothing pocket with his greasy, "Little brother, you're a good person. This matter was not handled properly on my part. This book was something I previously used to strengthen my body. Now that the temple is gone, I've thought it through and prepared to return to secular life. This book is no longer that important to me, so I'm giving it to you. I just feel that you are quite congenial." Lin Shi frowned as he looked at the yellowed book, noticing the obvious grease stains, and then saw the plump Taoist's sincere eyes, ultimately accepting it. "Thank you." After leaving the restaurant, Lin Shi returned to the hotel where he was staying and spent the entire night drawing the design for the shelter he had already constructed in his mind. The upper part of the design is a semicircle exposed above ground, while the lower part is a square basement. From an architectural perspective, circular buildings help reduce wind resistance and are sturdier. From the perspective of heat transfer, a circle is the shape that dissipates the least heat, making it more beneficial for insulation. The reason people who once lived in the Arctic built semicircular igloos is due to this principle. The outermost part of the building will be welded from alloys, while Lin Shi plans to use bank-grade explosion-proof steel plate walls at least 1 meter thick, with a layer of the best thermal insulation material inside, followed by standard protective materials. Lin Shi plans to install a fireplace in the center of the circular building to provide heat when generating electricity is inconvenient. Above it, he will create a chimney for ventilation. There will be a power circulation system both above and below the building. Lin Shi hasn't considered the water issue. The water purifier he bought and the purification tablets are not just for show. The details of the design still need to be modified by professionals. But this is the general idea. After finishing the design, Lin Shi, preparing to sleep, caught sight of the book he had casually left aside. It was the one given to him by the plump Taoist. Out of curiosity, he picked it up and began to flip through it. Lin Shi casually flipped through and discovered that the booklet was an illustrated manual depicting a small figure performing various martial arts moves closely resembling a martial arts manual. Lin Shi, intrigued, began to read from the beginning. The more he read, the more serious his expression became, even to the point of disbelief. The movements in this booklet surprisingly resembled the resonance technique he practiced. This left Lin Shi greatly astonished. He immediately jumped out of bed and began practicing the movements depicted in the booklet. As he practiced, he realized that this set of movements was indeed somewhat similar to resonance, yet it was far more complex and harder to master. Fortunately, he had prior experience from his past life practicing resonance, and his body had been tempered over this period, allowing him to barely manage to execute these movements. With each breath, the movements flowed and stretched, seemingly containing a profound rhythm. By the end of the first round of movements, Lin Shi was dripping with sweat, yet his breath remained steady, feeling completely at ease and warm. The results were surprisingly several times better than resonance. Although resonance also warmed his body, the effect was not as pronounced. Lin Shi solemnly picked up the dirty booklet again and turned it over. The 3 characters' nourishing life technique were clearly added later, while the original title seemed to have been worn away. This was definitely not an ordinary health book. If he hadn't experienced the apocalypse, he might have thought it was just a martial arts manual sold for a few coins at a stall. However, after understanding the miraculous aspects of practicing resonance during the apocalypse, Lin Shi realized this was undoubtedly a priceless manual. Once the extraordinary materials of the apocalypse appeared, it would be the time when this technique could truly shine. At the same time, Lin Shi was filled with doubts. Resonance only emerged in the 6th year of the apocalypse, and it was said to be developed through the collaboration of scientists and martial artists. Could the rumors be false, or was this rumor simply a fabrication released by the official shelters? Yet Lin Shi had a premonition that the emergence of resonance was definitely linked to this booklet. Now that this booklet was in his hands, would it change the original future? Lin Shi pondered for a moment, but decided not to think too much about it. Even if it did change the future, it wasn't something he needed to worry about right now. Moreover, he wasn't the only one aware of this technique. There was also that chubby Taoist priest. After waking up, Lin Shi discovered that Liao Peng had already gathered people early in the morning to start work at the old site of the Taoist temple. After breakfast, Lin Shi also went to the site. 2 excavators were clearing the ruins of the original temple building. Lin Shi found Liao Peng and handed him the blueprints he had designed the night before, explaining the key points. Liao Peng patted his chest and said, "All right, boss, I will have the engineers refine the design drawings. Additionally, regarding the well you mentioned, there is already one here buried beneath the rubble. I only found out about it because the worker on site told me just now." Lin Shi was somewhat surprised. This was an unexpected joy. For the next few days, Lin Shi stayed in the Sandy City, ordering various building materials and discussing the design plans for the shelter with the engineers. In his spare time, he practiced the nourishing life technique, and after a few days, Lin Shi felt that his physical strength had increased significantly compared to the past 10 days combined. With Lin Shi's relentless investment, the original ruins of the temple had vanished, replaced by a large and deep pit. The basement of the shelter had already been excavated, and the next step was to begin construction. Everything was progressing in an orderly fashion. However, in the early hours of March 22nd, a phone call made Lin Shi abandon the idea of staying in the Sandy City to oversee the project. It was a call from the warehouse attendant with a panicked voice on the line. "Boss, the warehouse is on fire." Lin Shi frowned and asked, "How did the fire start? What about the goods?" "I don't know. I was asleep and didn't hear anything. Somehow it just caught fire. Fortunately, I discovered it early, and only a small portion of the goods burned." Lin Shi had to leave the matter at hand and entrust everything to Liao Peng. He then took the flight that day back to Sanyuan City. It was raining heavily in Sanyuan City. As soon as Lin Shi got off the plane and opened his phone, he saw more than a dozen missed calls, all from the warehouse attendant. Lin Shi immediately called one back, but there was no answer. He checked the weather in Sanyuan City for the past 2 days and found it had been rainy. Since it was rainy, how could there be a fire? Just as he arrived at the warehouse entrance, he heard a loud voice from inside. "Throw everything inside out. You can't do this. My boss will be back soon." It was the voice of the warehouse attendant. He saw several people throwing boxes of goods outside. It was pouring outside, and some of these goods could not be exposed to rain. If they got wet, they could be ruined. "What are you doing?" Lin Shi blocked the warehouse entrance, his cold gaze sweeping over the few people who were about to throw the boxes outside. The group was intimidated by Lin Shi's presence and halted their steps. "What's going on?" A middle-aged thin man approached and saw Lin Shi, who also recognized him. However, Lin Shi did not know this person. "Who's this kid? Step aside and don't block the way." The thin man had a fierce expression. "Who are you? Who allowed you to touch my things?" Lin Shi coldly questioned. The warehouse attendant, looking distressed, hurried to Lin Shi and complained, "Boss, you're finally back. Just now I was directing the unloading when these people suddenly rushed in, saying the warehouse belonged to them and demanded that we move our things out. I couldn't stop them." The thin man showed an understanding expression, sizing up Lin Shi. "So you're Lin Shi." Before Lin Shi could respond, the thin man pointed to himself with his thumb. "This warehouse is rented to me from today onward. Kid, you burned the landlord's warehouse and they don't want to rent to you anymore. Get your things and roll out." The warehouse attendant indignantly said, "Even if we are moving things, we need time, right? I already told you my boss will be back soon, and you didn't even bother to wait before trying to throw our things out. Is there no reason to discuss?" This is your business. Now the warehouse is mine. Your things are occupying my warehouse. What's wrong with me throwing them out? The thin man dug at his ears, looking indifferent, which made the warehouse attendant fume with anger. It was evident even to a fool that this was targeted harassment. Lin Sher's eyes narrowed slightly, a glimmer of dangerous light flashing in his elongated gaze. I signed a contract and the rent has not expired. Whether you rent to me or not is not for you to decide. Let the landlord come with the penalty fee to discuss with me. I'm giving you 1 minute to get out of my place. Oh, you haven't even grown up yet, and you're trying to act tough. When I was mingling in society, you were still drinking milk. Get lost. The thin man reached out as if to push Lin Sher aside dismissively. However, Lin Sher grabbed the thin man's hand and twisted it forcefully. With a crack, a scream followed. Off. The thin man's hand was already dislocated. Though his face turned pale from the pain, he was still a tough character. Ignoring his already captured right hand, he swung his other fist towards Lin Sher, cursing, "You dog bastard, you're dead meat." Lin Sher easily caught the punch with his hand. To him, this punch was weak and feeble. The thin man before him, despite his fierce demeanor, had reached his limit. With a crack, Lin Sher twisted the thin man's left hand as well and kicked him away. Without any arm to support him, the thin man fell face first to the ground, his teeth cutting into his lip. Lying on the ground, the thin man shouted, "Are you all blind? Kill him for me." Things happened too quickly. The few people who had come with the thin man finally threw down the boxes they were carrying and rushed forward. However, how could they possibly be a match for Lin Sher, who had been through countless real battles? Lin Sher kicked one person away, caught two fists coming at him, and pulled hard. The two immediately stumbled, losing their balance, and Lin Sher seized their necks, slamming them together, which resulted in two abrupt screams that quickly ceased. As he released them, they fell limp to the ground unconscious. He easily sidestepped a punch coming from the side and countered with an elbow strike, causing the attacker to curl up like a shrimp and collapse onto the ground. With just a few simple moves, and without even warming up, 4 people lay on the ground. Lin Sher had already shown restraint, not wanting to escalate the situation. If this were the apocalypse, these people would be dead. The thin man, having just turned over, saw this scene and realized he had run into a brick wall. He had thought he was just dealing with a university student, someone he could easily handle, and was pleased that someone was offering money. Never did he expect to encounter such a tough opponent. The last remaining person caught sight of the murderous glint in Lin Sher's eyes and fearfully stepped back a few paces. He was so frightened that he dared not approach anymore, instead turning and running into the rain. Lin Sher did not pursue him, but walked up to the thin man, who was now sitting up. "Who sent you? Did you set fire to my warehouse?" Lin Sher had his suspicions, but wanted to confirm. Yet even in such a situation, the thin man seemed undeterred and threatened. "If you have the guts, kill me. Otherwise, I will make sure to kill you." A glint of murderous intent flashed in Lin Sher's eyes. He turned to the warehouse manager, who was standing there dumbfounded, and said, "Call the police. The order of peace in times of peace has saved these scoundrels." The warehouse manager suddenly came to his senses, trembling as he took out his phone to report the incident, looking at Lin Sher with a mixture of awe and fear. Soon law enforcement arrived at the warehouse, accompanied by an ambulance. As soon as the officers arrived, the thin man immediately retaliated, saying, "Officer, this person barged into my warehouse and attacked me. He dislocated both my hands." "Who called the police?" Lin Sher raised his hand. "I did. Please explain the situation." The officer took out a recording pen. Lin Sher recounted how they had barged into his warehouse, discarded his goods, and attacked him first. A few boxes of goods were still lying in the rain at the warehouse entrance. The warehouse manager also confirmed that Lin Sher was telling the truth. Lin Sher had not used excessive force. Aside from some superficial injuries and mild concussions, the others were soon recovering. The thin man's dislocated hand was also reset by the emergency doctor. Lin Sher pretended to take something from his backpack, but actually pulled out a lease agreement. "This is the contract for renting this warehouse." The officer glanced at it and confirmed that the contract was valid. The situation was very clear. One of the officers said, "Take these people back with you." "Hold on." Even now, the thin man showed no panic, instead taking out his phone to make a call. The phone rang outside the warehouse. A middle-aged man and a young man walked into the warehouse. Lin Sher squinted slightly, recognizing one of them. "Li Duoyu." Upon seeing Lin Sher, Li Duoyu's lips curled into a smug smile. The middle-aged man, presumably Li Duoyu's father, pulled one of the officers aside. He said a few words, and then made a phone call, holding it to the officer's ear. Lin Sher frowned, observing the scene. At that moment, Lin Sher's phone rang. It was his landlord. "Lin Sher, your workers almost burned down my warehouse. I'm not renting it anymore. I'll refund you the remaining rent and deposit. Please move out as soon as possible." Lin Sher frowned and replied, "There's nothing about that in the contract. Besides, the fire incident hasn't been investigated yet." The landlord sounded helpless and somewhat anxious on the line. "Don't investigate, it's all your fault. Please just move out. I beg you, will refund you all the rent for this month." After saying that, he hung up the phone and immediately returned the entire 6,000 yuan to Lin Sher. It seemed that this warehouse really couldn't be rented anymore. Now that Lin Shi's belongings were mostly piled up, moving out didn't matter much to him. But being forced out like this was quite unpleasant. Li Duyu walked up to Lin Shi, sneering as he said in a voice only the two could hear, "This is the consequence of offending me. The real show is just beginning. I will make sure you can't survive in Sanyuan City." Lin Shi raised an eyebrow looking at Li Duyu in surprise and said loudly, "What are you saying? Aren't you your father's biological son?" His voice was so loud that it attracted the attention of those around them. Everyone looked at Li Duyu in astonishment. Li Duyu's face turned the color of a pig's liver as he quickly explained, "I didn't say that. He's talking nonsense." Li Duyu glared fiercely at Lin Shi, wishing he could kill him with a glance. Before long, the officer who had been pulled aside by Li Duyu's father returned and pointed at Lin Shi, saying, "Take this person back with you." "Wait." Lin Shi frowned. He wasn't too surprised by the scene before him. From the thin man's initial confidence to this series of actions, Lin Shi had already guessed that these people must have some backing. But he was not a soft persimmon. "I want to ask, why are you taking me back?" The officer's expression was serious. "You are suspected of arson and intentional injury. You must come with me to the station for investigation." Li Duyu looked at Lin Shi with a smug expression, clearly indicating this is the consequence of offending me. "Once you go to the police station, you're finished." Lin Shi showed no signs of panic and continued to defend himself. "I already said they were the ones who attacked first. That's just your side of the story and cannot be used as evidence." Lin Shi's face flashed with a hint of sarcasm. "But you didn't say that earlier." A flicker of anger flashed in the officer's eyes. "The other party has more witnesses than you. We have the right to investigate again. Come with us." "But I have evidence." Lin Shi grinned, his eyes cold as he took out his phone. "When I moved and I installed several surveillance cameras in the warehouse. What you just said in the corner should also have been recorded." The angrier Lin Shi became the brighter his smile appeared, yet the coldness in his eyes was enough to freeze anyone. He suddenly began to reminisce about the arrival of the apocalypse. At least the evil in the apocalypse was unequivocally evil. The security officer standing before him felt pricked by Lin Shi's deranged smile. Such an expression typically belonged to a psychopathic killer. And what did he just say? A recording. The security officer's expression changed, and he reached for the phone in Lin Shi's hand. However, Lin Shi seemed to possess foresight, calmly stepping back 2 paces before the security officer could act. "They'll show you what I recorded." After saying this, he lowered his head to press on his phone. The security officer, seeing this, quickly tried to grab Lin Shi. But to his surprise, it was as if Lin Shi had eyes on the top of his head, skillfully evading the grasp. Once could be called a coincidence, but twice stunned everyone present. This person was surprisingly skilled. No wonder he could take down 5 men with his bare hands. "Why are you suddenly trying to snatch my phone? You scared me into posting the recording online." Lin Shi innocently displayed the screen to everyone. Li Duyu's father, Li Duozai, was so furious that his face turned green. Before coming here, he had confirmed with the landlord that there were no surveillance devices in the warehouse, which was why he reluctantly came to handle it himself. It was unexpected that there were surveillance cameras installed in a warehouse rented for just a month. If the scene of the two talking in the corner was truly posted online and the situation escalated, not only would they both suffer, but it would also implicate several others. The phone call Li Duokai had just made was to the director of the Sanyuan City Security Bureau. If this small matter implicated the director, it would trigger a series of repercussions. The network of connections that Li Duokai had painstakingly built in Sanyuan City could suffer a devastating blow. Li Duokai glared fiercely at Li Duyu, yet now was not the time to deal with this ungrateful son. Li Duokai needed to intercept the video that had been posted online before it could escalate. Unfortunately, he was unaware that Lin Shi's hundreds of thousands of fans had already seen the accidentally posted recording and had begun to share it wildly. It was too late for Li Duokai to stop it. The emaciated man evidently realized something as his expression visibly changed. If there was surveillance, wouldn't the scene of him setting the fire in the early morning have been recorded as well? Had the previous confrontation also been captured? The emaciated man glared at Lin Shi with burning fury, no longer calm as he had been at the beginning, and hurried to catch up to Li Duokai. "Take him away." The security officer shouted angrily as the other officers quickly stepped forward to subdue Lin Shi. Lin Shi did not resist, smiling and cooperating while his phone was snatched away. "I can walk by myself. Lao Huang, tidy up the things in the warehouse and find a big truck to load them. Park it in the nearby parking lot and wait for me to return." Lao Huang, the warehouse manager, nodded eagerly. Lin Shi got into the police car. Only Lao Huang remained in the warehouse. Today's scene had completely shattered his worldview. He had never seen such a daring boss. But now that the boss had been taken away by the security officers, Lao Huang wore a bitter face, unsure if he would ever get his salary back. Lin Shi's sandwich between 2 officers showed no signs of nervousness. The car had not driven far when a security officer sitting next to Lin Shi received a phone call. After a while, he looked at Lin Shi strangely and handed the phone to the officer who had confronted Lin Shi earlier. "Captain, it's for you." It turned out he was a captain, and Lin Shuriwei raised an eyebrow. The officer called Captain took the phone, and his face changed from white to red, then from red to black as he nodded vigorously. Yes, 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 all right, yes, yes. After hanging up, he immediately said, "Stop the car." The vehicle quickly pulled over. "You can go now?" The officer called Captain looked at Lin Shuriwei with hatred in his eyes, seemingly very unwilling, yet utterly powerless. Lin Shuriwei smiled and extended his hand. "My phone. Your phone contains evidence and needs to be cooperated with in the investigation." Lin Shuriwei shrugged, got out of the car, and walked away. Lu Ting watched Lin Shuriwei walk further away before withdrawing his gaze. Lin Shuriwei turned back to recharge a card and then bought a new phone. The video he had posted had indeed caused, moreover, it was a significant impact. If the apocalypse had not arrived with this wave of actions, Lin Shuriwei had no idea how many people he had offended. As a person with no background, he might vanish into the vast sea of people at any moment. But now he feared nothing. Lin Shuriwei took down the video and also canceled his social media accounts. The goal had been achieved, he did not want to become more famous. Back at the warehouse, Lao Huang was still calling for a vehicle, not expecting Lin Shuriwei to return so quickly. He was also taken aback. Lin Shuriwei settled his wages, sent Lao Huang away, closed the warehouse door, and checked the items inside. What had been burned was a small portion of the sleds he had ordered online, a total of 10. Originally, Lin Shuriwei had planned to buy a few sled dogs to raise for the apocalypse. Now that these items had been burned, so be it. The equipment that had been thrown into the rain was mostly undamaged. After storing the items in his space, Lin Shuriwei immediately booked a flight ticket to Shushi, leaving Sanyuan City. Soon news broke in Sanyuan City about the shareholder of a well-known enterprise being implicated in power for sex transactions with government officials. The shareholder was none other than Li Duoy's father. It seemed that if the apocalypse did not come, this rich second generation would not be able to succeed. This incident implicated many people, including one security officer who was dismissed. However, Lin Shiyu's focus was not on this matter, but rather fixated on the words Qingqi New Energy Company. A flicker of deeply hidden hatred flashed in his eyes. A few days later, the school suddenly called Lin Shuriwei, saying he had been expelled for not attending classes for an extended period. Lin Shuriwei knew someone was behind this, but such tactics did not pain him at all. For the next 2 months, he supervised the construction of the shelter in Shushi. Most of the time was spent cultivating the health preservation technique. He took time out to return to Sanyuan City to collect the goods he had ordered from Lao Xie without lingering. He took them and left. This also allowed him to evade a conspiracy against him. On May 25th, the shelter was finally completed. The total construction period was over 2 months, costing Lin Shuriwei over 9 million, all spent on materials and labor. The semicircular shelter had no windows except for a chimney and an entrance and exit passage. Viewed from the back, the entire shelter resembled an iron ball embedded in the earth. There were 2 doors, an outer door and an inner door, all heavy blast doors. Both entry and exit required passing through 2 doors. Workers joked that the shelter could withstand the aftermath of a nuclear weapon. Inside the shelter, there were squat toilets, a heated Kong, a cooking stove, and other designs that did not require electrical power. All electrical wires were located indoors. Although it affected the aesthetics, it made future repairs more convenient. A water pipe was also installed from the well to supply water to the shelter. Lin Shuriwei had the well cover completely sealed, so the well water would not freeze so easily. Next, all he had to do was place the daily necessities from the space inside, and he could move in. There were only 6 days left until the solar flare outbreak. Lin Shur spent a day setting up the shelter, and aside from the electrical appliances, everything else was prepared. He also bought several carpets to lay in the living room of the shelter. The electrical appliances would have to wait until the geomagnetic storm passed to avoid damage. After the shelter was built, Liao Peng followed Lin Shur around with nothing much to do. Lin Shur thought for a moment and said, "You go prepare some supplies and put them in your rental apartment." The apocalypse was about to arrive, and he didn't mind lending Liao Peng a hand as a reward for his diligent work over the past 2 months. Future salaries would be impossible to give him, and of course, if he didn't listen, Lin Shur wouldn't remind him again. After sending Liao Peng away, Lin Shur took out his phone and unblocked a number. Zhao Xiao. Lin Shur dialed the number. "Lin Shur, is that really you? Where have you been lately? The last time I saw you, you were taken away by the security guard in a short video. Are you okay?" Zhao Xiao's voice sounded very surprised. It was indeed surprising. After 2 months, he was almost buried in complaints from his parents, and the plan to buy a new house was delayed because he couldn't borrow money from Lin Shur. Lin Shur said, "I'm fine. I've just been in a bad mood and traveling in Sha City. Do you want to come over and hang out for a few days?" Zhao Xiao agreed without a second thought on the other end of the line. "Sure. They'll go ask for a few days off to spend time with you." After chatting a bit, Lin Shur hung up the phone. How could he forget Zhao Xiao, the person who had caused his death in his past life? He couldn't return to Sanyuan City, but that didn't mean he would let Zhao Xiao off the hook. Luring Zhao Xiao to Sha City to deal with him was just the same. Lin Shur replenished 10 tons of bottled water in Sha City and bought some food he liked. In extreme cold, water was the least scarce resource. Snow was everywhere. One could quench thirst by eating snow, although it would make the body colder, but compared to the hard-to-obtain food, water was indeed something survivors need not worry about. Viruses and bacteria were everywhere. Whether one ate snow or not was not significantly related to falling ill. Most survivors had developed antibodies after a few years of the apocalypse. Eating raw meat, eating snow, wearing animal furs, humans gradually adapted to the harsh survival environment, while those who could not adapt had already died. Linsher prepared some water as a precaution. He also bought 2 computers and copied countless materials and some movies, cartoons, and games online. This included information on making various tools, repairing electricity, and generators. These materials might become extremely valuable in the future. Aside from the gold bars he had copied out, he had some money left with less than 100,000 in cash remaining. Everything was ready. 3 days before the glass solar flare outbreak, Zhao Xiao hurriedly came from Sanyuan City. It was evident that Zhao Xiao had not been doing well these past 2 months. He had lost weight. Upon seeing Linsher, Zhao Xiao greeted him warmly and apologized, behaving very humbly while observing Linsher's expression. "Linsher, I truly consider you like a brother and didn't think too much about it. Can you forgive me? I promise to do more for you in the future." Linsher revealed an ambiguous smile and nodded perfunctorily. "Let's play here for a week before you leave, and he'll cover all expenses." Zhao Xiao's face visibly lit up with joy. Indeed, Linsher was still the big heart Linsher. It seemed that last time he had indeed overdone it, making Linsher angry. Great. Zhao Xiao readily agreed, and he still needed to find the opportunity to bring up borrowing money. "By the way, when did you come to Sha City alone? I heard online that you were expelled from school. Is that true?" Zhao Xiao seemed concerned, but the glint of glee in his eyes was hard to conceal. "It's true," Linsher nodded, pretending not to notice. Zhao Xiao feigned consolation for a few moments, and then discussed the plans for the next few days with him. Linsher truly wanted to relax a bit these days. Before the apocalypse arrived, the risks of acting were relatively high, and Linsher couldn't wait for these few days. What he needed to do was keep Zhao Xiao in Sha City, and when the apocalypse arrived, let Zhao Xiao experience the despair of the apocalypse before he died. Linsher never considered himself a good person. In his past life, after losing the affection of his parents, he had placed all his emotions on Zhao Xiao and a few. In the early days of the apocalypse, when money still had some use, he distributed the gold bars left by his father to a few people, giving them hope to survive. During the apocalypse, when he and Zhao Xiao relied on each other, he always took the initiative to do dangerous things. However, all he got in return was betrayal. This was partly due to his own weakness and inability to see the true nature of people. Therefore, in this life, he would not be soft-hearted again and would no longer believe in ridiculous emotions. Although many events, including betrayal from his past life, had not yet happened, Zhao Xiao's nature remained the same. Even if given another chance, he would still completely exploit him. Linsher lowered his gaze to hide the chill in his eyes. "Hey, isn't Su Qin also studying at university in Sha City? Should we invite her to come out and join us?" Zhao Xiao raised an eyebrow at Linsher, revealing a knowing look that any man would understand. Su Qin was the second girl in their group of 6 apart from Su Feifei. Linsher's impression of her was still stuck 8 years ago. During high school, the others would always try to match him, and Su Qin placing them together and discussing. After being told so many times, Linsher developed different feelings for this girl. However, now it had been 8 years since he last saw her, and he couldn't even clearly remember her face. When this person was mentioned again, Linsher felt nothing, but Zhao Xiao kept encouraging him, so Linsher casually. They found a hotel, settled Zhao Xiao, and Linsher stayed next door to him. Zhao Xiao indeed arranged to meet Su Qin. The next day, May 29th, was 2 days before the glass solar flare outbreak. Linsher and Zhao Xiao went to the beach in Sha City and met Su Qin, whom they hadn't seen in 8 years. Su Qin was a dance major at the Sha City University of Arts, and her figure was naturally excellent. Because they were playing at the beach today, Su Qin boldly wore a bikini, which left Zhao Xiao staring in awe. Linsher wore swim trunks under his clothes, and after taking off his shirt, his solid, yet not overly muscular physique caught Su Qin's attention. "Linsher, when did you get your body in such great shape?" Su Qin completely ignored the average-looking Zhao Xiao beside her and frequently gazed at Linsher's abs. "I've recently taken a liking to exercising," Linsher casually replied, setting up a beach chair, putting on sunglasses, and beginning to enjoy the sun. In 2 days, people wouldn't need sunglasses to look directly at the fireball in the sky. Before the apocalypse came, Linsher also wanted to enjoy the last 2 days of warm sunshine and relax his always tense mood. Su Qin lay beside Linsher sunbathing. The two chatted casually, completely ignoring Zhao Xiao. A shadow crossed Zhao Xiao's eyes, but he still forced a smile to insert himself into their conversation. The 3 of them stayed until the sun set before leaving the beach and finding a place to have a meal before parting ways. On the last day, Linsher still spent a day in Sha City with Zhao Xiao and Su Qin. Finally, the time arrived on June 1st, to Children's Day. The day of the SS Glass solar flare outbreak. On the morning of June 1st, Lin Shi practiced the nourishing technique on the flat ground outside the shelter, as usual. Zhao Xiao had invited him to go diving today, but he declined, citing that he had matters to attend to. He wanted to stay in the shelter to observe how the sun would differ during the solar flare. The fierce solar storm caused by the flare wouldn't reach Earth until June 4th, so it would still be safe until the 4th. What was strange about this solar flare was that no country had detected any. With the technology currently available on the planet Tianyan star, this situation was extremely bizarre. At that moment, Lin Shi wore a pair of sunglasses. Although his body was in constant motion, his eyes never left the sun in the sky. This posture was undoubtedly somewhat comical. Several villagers from the mountains saw this scene from a distance and began to discuss it. What is that young man doing? What kind of ritual is this? It looks quite eerie. What he built doesn't look normal. Are we still getting paid? Yes, we must. What are we afraid of? Let's go ask for it tomorrow, or I'll go find Uncle Li to discuss how we should demand it. After completing 5 sets of the nourishing technique, Lin Shi suddenly paused as he began the 6th set. The sun he had been staring at showed no signs of change, but the reason he halted his movements was because the interface of the Treasure Basin, which had not shown any significant changes since its upgrade, had unexpectedly turned into a mass of garbled characters. What was happening? Shocked, Lin Shi immediately stopped practicing and began to observe the Treasure Basin. He discovered that not only had the interface turned into gibberish, but he could no longer sense the space. Lin Shi's pupils constricted sharply. This was no trivial matter. The space contained all the supplies he had accumulated over the past 3 months. If the space suddenly ceased to function, his advantage from being reborn would significantly diminish. At that moment, Lin Shi suddenly realized how overly reliant he was on the space. About several seconds later, the garbled characters in front of him formed a set of Chinese characters. The apocalypse reset on Tianyan star has been initiated for the 3rd time. This process will accelerate species evolution, and it has detected that the Treasure Basin recognizes intelligent beings as its main target, initiating the host protection plan. Lin Shi's pupils trembled with shock. The amount of information contained in this statement was overwhelming. Apocalypse reset. The 3rd time. Having experienced the apocalypse in his previous life, returning to the time before the apocalypse to undergo it again. Does this count as 2 times? But why did the Treasure Basin indicate this was the 3rd time? Could it be that in his previous life before his rebirth, the apocalypse had already reset once? There was no time to ponder the implications of the subsequent characters as the interface in front of him reassembled into another message. The first wave of danger will arrive in 71 hours. Please be prepared. Lin Shi's heart raced like a drum. Was this a warning? Was the Treasure Basin intelligent? Moments later, this text vanished and the Treasure Basin interface returned to normal. He could sense the space again. However, the countdown in the upper right corner, showing 71 hours and 43 minutes, made Lin Shi realize that what he just experienced was not an illusion. Lin Shi turned and returned to the shelter, brewed himself a cup of coffee, and took a few sips to calm himself down. He recalled the anomalies that had appeared on the Treasure Basin interface. He speculated that this wave of anomalies was very likely related to the so-called SS-level solar flare. The solar flare explosion marked the beginning of this apocalypse, and the previous message from the Treasure Basin, the apocalypse reset on Tianyan star, has been initiated for the 3rd time. This process will accelerate species evolution, detecting that the Treasure Basin recognizes intelligent beings as its main target, initiating the spark protection plan. Also stated that the apocalypse had already begun. Lin Shi was particularly concerned about the number 3. Upon reflection, aside from himself, perhaps no one in this world knew that he would experience the apocalypse again. The fact of his rebirth still felt very strange to Lin Shi. He had died, yet he had been reborn 8 years ago. All of humanity, the entire Tianyan star, had returned to the state it was in 8 years ago. Was this time flowing backward? Or was it a reset? According to known human understanding, time cannot flow backward unless it ascends to a theological level. The Mandela effect. The work of deities. A game by a higher civilization. Or a correction of the very powers of nature. And this kind of thing could surprisingly have happened for the 3rd time. Before he obtained this Treasure Basin, had time ever flowed backward, and had humanity experienced the catastrophic disasters of the apocalypse that would appear days later? And when the first apocalypse was reset, was he also completely unaware of it, just like the billions of other humans and countless living beings now? Why was there a reset 3 times? Was it because the life forms on Tianyan star were obliterated in the previous 2 resets? This conjecture was both shocking and terrifying. What exactly is the Treasure Basin? Why would such information appear? No wonder it said that knowing too much is— The more Lin Shi thought about it, the more questions arose. His breathing became rapid, and his mind buzzed, nearly about to explode. His heart raced so fast that he couldn't calm down. He was frightened. If he continued to think this way, Lin Shi would begin to doubt whether the universe in current human understanding was being controlled by some higher civilization. They were like mere lab rats, subjected to one experiment after another. Linsher closed his eyes and hummed a tune to distract himself. After completing the song, he finally cast aside these bizarre thoughts from his mind. He took out his computer to search for information about the Ice Age. Tianyan Star had experienced several ice ages. Before this extreme cold apocalypse arrived, humanity's ancestors had gone through an ice age lasting over 2 million years. It only ended more than 10,000 years ago. This period is also known as the Quaternary Ice Age. Linsher only browsed roughly to see whether there were humans involved in the previous 3 ice ages. Just talking about this Quaternary Ice Age nearly led to the extinction of all animals that could not withstand the cold. Most of those that survived in the icy wilderness were large, hairy creatures. Yet humanity managed to survive. Scientists have speculated that humans possessed a strong creativity and adaptability. However, Linsher felt that this explanation did not hold water. Those who had not experienced extreme cold could not imagine its terror. In the 8th year of the apocalypse, only less than 1 million of the 7.8 billion humans remained. This shows the horror of the apocalypse. And in that period over 2 million years ago, there were no technological items and resources were extremely scarce. There were few plants and no medicines. Countless large carnivorous mammals, such as saber-toothed tigers, short-faced bears, brutal lions, and terror wolves lived during this time. They were massive, fierce, and carnivorous. With the size and speed of a normal human, one could only become prey for these large carnivorous beasts. Even if they could survive in extreme cold, it would be difficult to live on. Even more bizarrely, after the Ice Age ended, these ferocious large creatures went extinct. Yet humanity continued to thrive to this day. This is hard to explain with adaptability and creativity. But if there was involvement and assistance from a higher civilization, then everything becomes much more reasonable.